baby gorillas, and hopefully this is going to be working out fantastically well. And with the legendary man Richard Lucas, give me 2 seconds, Richard, just make sure this is actually coming through, and if it's coming through, we're recording properly. Have we got this? Come on.
Oh, well, hello, my baby gorillas, and hopefully this is going to be working out fantastically well. And
So, without further ado, let's see the man we've all been waiting for, Mr. Lucas, the chairman president of what's the official title?
Leader of the Scottish Family Party.
Welcome
everyone.
Now the 8th largest party in Scotland.
That's right, yeah.
That's fantastic, isn't it? You must be chuffed for that.
Yeah, we certainly are, yeah. I think there are a lot of parties we thought might have done better than us, ended up quite a long way behind us. So yeah, we're pretty pleased. But we're not stopping at 8. We're on the way up.
Yeah, well, let me. I'm just going to actually do a wee screen share just now, and I'm going to get Wikipedia up and actually to highlight this to who actually was behind you and who was in front of you, if that's okay with you. Because I think I've not done this before, so let's just do a wee screen share here, and let's go into Wikipedia. Results, Scottish. So, I mean, it's quite incredible when we scroll down to who you actually beat. So, this is let me just reduce that slightly. It's quite an incredible feat. Now, as far as I'm aware, and you can correct me if my history is incorrect, the Family Party was only set up in a few years ago, 4 years ago, is that correct? 2017?
Yeah, August 2017.
I can remember the Family Party. I must be getting delusional because I remember a Family Party being before that. Has there been another Family Party? Has it been reinstated?
No, there's been one in Australia. There's one in Germany. There's a few in Europe. There's one in Nepal. But no, there hasn't been one in Scotland before.
Oh,
fantastic. Must have had a premonition.
Yes, I'm sure I saw in the ballot paper with the Christian Party. But okay, let's just assume that I was incorrect here. But I think that's incredible. So, if can you see the screen okay? Can you see everything?
Yes, yeah, that's good.
So, obviously, and I like the way that you phrased it. You said that in one of your podcasts, which I think is one of the reasons you've done so well, is the fact of what you've actually done over the months coming into this. You had a great lead-in time. You obviously communicated your messages very well, and there was a massive resonance in the populace, in the voting populace, to actually get you to where you are just now. I would suggest. Did you feel that?
Yes, yeah. Now, I think our tagline is filling the void in Scottish politics. And that void is certainly there. There are an awful lot of people who feel that the mainstream parties don't represent what they think by a long, long way. The number of messages we had, people saying, I wasn't going to vote until I discovered the Scottish Family Party, and now there's someone I can actually vote for in good conscience. There are so many messages like that, which is great.
So I'm going to quote you because I listened to one of your podcasts and I thought it was a rather good metaphor. You said the SNP are in Division 1 by themselves, and the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are in Division 2, and the Greens just now and the Liberal Democrats are in Division 3. And you now find yourself in Division 4 with the Alba Party and all, which is Alex Salmond's, for the international audience, Alex Salmond's new political party, and All for Unity, which is our friend Georgie Porgy's party, Georgie Porgy Galloway. And then you are quite a substantial away ahead of the rest on 16,000 votes, and you got the highest number outside the independents, but outside the five main parties in the first past the post system as well, which I thought was quite, if we just look down no other political party apart from the independents got more first past the post.
Yeah, I haven't really looked at that before, but yeah, you're quite right.
How many candidates out of the, I think it was 60 something odd constituencies did you field in the constituencies?
63 constituencies. We had 7 candidates in the constituencies.
Wow.
7.
So if you had more representation, that could have been substantially going up then.
Yeah, well, my sort of dream is that in the Westminster election, 4 years' time, probably, if it happens on time, it would be great to have a candidate in every constituency. Because that will put us in a totally different league to all the other smaller parties. I think Alba and All for Unity, how can they possibly stand at a Westminster election? That goes against their very raison d'etre. I mean, they would just be splitting the nationalist or the unionist vote. So that would just be crazy for them. But for us, if we could have a candidate in every constituency, I mean, that's a big ask. That's a tall order. But, 4 years' time, let's say we have 42 people as candidates this time. So if we get the 63, then it costs quite a lot of money as well to put them all up. Then I think we could get, who knows, 1-2% more, 1-3%.
I mean,
the Westminster election.
If they can self-finance, or you can actually get them to finance through PayPal, not PayPal, but like a GoFundMe type thing.
Crowdfunding, yes.
Some sort of crowdfunding. But I mean, you can spend up to, I think, about £13,000 per constituency per candidate, as far as I'm aware. So obviously,
the basics for the candidate up is it's £500 deposit, which you get back if you get 5%. I mean, we're unlikely to get 5%, I mean, even in 4 years' time. In the Westminster election, Scottish election is a different matter. But the other thing is Royal Mail have to deliver a leaflet for you free of charge. So if you don't make use of that, then, I mean, there's hardly much point standing. So we want a leaflet in every constituency as well. So that will cost another, £400 or £500. So in total, it could be about, going on £60,000 to put up a candidate in every constituency. But I think that would be a big breakthrough for us.
So the things I would like to discuss with you before we go into something else is that obviously, I mean, okay, we'll say the Family Party is still a new party as well, but certainly Alba and All for Unity are new parties. These are led by ex-First Minister and obviously somebody in George Galloway who's been in Parliament, in Westminster Parliament for a number of years for the Labour Party. So these are seasoned politicians. And really, the Family Party have come out of nowhere and I have to say the Freedom Alliance did rather well, but Reform UK, which is the old Brexit party, the Scottish Libertarian Party, UKIP, and so the Social Democrats, the Liberals, and you've been some in the Communist Party of Britain, and you've really beaten some you've got some notable scalps underneath you now, haven't you, really, from coming out from nowhere?
Definitely. I think like Reform UK, Brexit Party, the Brexit Party was massive not too long ago. They were winning the European election. And they had more money to spend than us in the campaign. It seemed that way. They had more media exposure. They had an MSP. So there are a lot of things going for them. And yet, I didn't get there. I mean, UKIP as well, in terms of name recognition. Everyone's heard of UKIP. Not necessarily a helpful thing, but probably it is among the people who would vote for them. So they had that huge advantage as well.
But it just shows you though, Richard, from looking at even the Alba Party on 44,000, so they nearly get, let's say 45,000, they're still about a third of the way there on the regional list, and even with the Liberal Democrats on 137,000, getting 5%, just over 5% of the vote, they still get zero regional MSPs, so it must be between the sweet spot, it must be between 5 and 8% of the vote to actually start returning MSPs.
I think 5% puts you in with a chance. There's a possibility to get elected on 5%. But if you're on like 7, you're pretty well guaranteed to get some in. But I think the Lib Dems were maybe a bit unlucky with that.
Well, I mean, it's still quite substantially and when you go down to even the Alba Party is only 1.66%, and All for Unity is less than 1%. Obviously, all the rest of them are less than 1%. Yeah. Is there, I'll come on to political strategy later on with you, but do you think there is going to be requirements for some sort of rationalisation of the smaller parties to actually work together?
I think there is a lot of duplication there. I don't think the Scottish Family Party was duplicated, but I think some of the others were like, All for Unity, Reform, and UKIP, and Abolish the Scottish Parliament. They were really appealing to the same sort of voter, I would suggest, mainly. Huge overlap there, and not a lot of distinction in the policies. The thing is, it's people generally, once you've got people at the top, they don't like the idea of basically merging their baby, if you like, with another one. So they're not the top dog anymore. Yeah. So merging is a tricky thing, and I would be surprised if it happened. I mean, I was in UKIP years ago, and I know the people in charge of it now, and I would be staggered if they ever walked away from UKIP and said, "No, okay, that we'll merge or we'll do something else." Now, Reform. That's maybe a different matter. People have gone on board for that for Brexit. So this hasn't got a huge heritage. People maybe not that committed to it. So I think Reform could just disappear very quickly. And maybe they would be open to mergers. Abolish the Scottish Parliament. I mean, at least it basically started by two people. One of them, as I understand it, I'm pretty sure this is right, used to be the Glasgow chairman of UKIP. So Abolish the Scottish Parliament is sort of a splinter group from UKIP, not entirely, but partly. So the possibility that they're going to join back together again seems a bit of a long shot. The maths would point towards it, but I'm not sure it will really happen with the characters. But we shall see.
The reason I was asking this is obviously to actually then break into the top five, whether you're going to get a constituency vote or get a regional vote, there's going to have to be an epiphany with the people who are voting for the existing five parties. And obviously the media is restricting access for the smaller parties to get their message out. So I would suggest that we do something out with like media for the smaller parties so that they can actually, we'll host things from the Guerilla TV channel and actually allow smaller party leaders to be able to be represented on stage, because they seem to be not being represented. They're cut out. Even Alex Salmond and George Galloway weren't allowed to the leadership debate, even though that Alex Salmond has two MPs now sitting at Westminster and still not allowed to put his points forward at the leadership debate. Or George Galloway, who I think, like yourself, would have all been desirable additions to actually the leadership debate there.
Yeah, I think All for Unity, George Galloway got a lot of media exposure. I know, I mean, it was nothing compared to the mainstream parties, but he got quite a bit. He was on TV quite a few times. I reckon Alba got huge coverage, massive coverage. Again, they would probably complain they weren't in the debates or whatever, but anyone who was watching the telly or looking at a newspaper or looking online, that they would know full well that Alex Salmond had started the Alba Party, and they would understand what it was all about. I actually wrote to the BBC after the election and said, right, this is our percentage. So quick rough calculation, this is how many times the Scottish Family Party should be on debate night between now and the next election. So then I worked out there were 750 slots for politicians to go onto their debate night show between now and the next Scottish election. And I said, out of those, the Scottish Family Party should have, I can't remember the figure, but we should have been on more than once a year if they did it fairly. But they don't. It's a bit of a cartel. Yeah, there's the existing parties keep it that way, and they like it that way. And that's the way it is. But
I think that's even more reason to actually stop the cartel, and actually if we can work with leaders to actually host things now, we can actually then bring more attention to other alternative voices, regardless if it's left, right or centre, who are actually wanting so we'll actually have an alternative leadership debate prior to, for instance, the next Westminster elections, so that people can actually start to hear the alternative voices, so they're not getting stifled and prevented by the mainstream media, who seem to be working almost in a cartel with the political class just now.
If you imagine that, say, Nicola Sturgeon, they got her in a TV studio, and tied her in a chair so she couldn't run off, and made a debate with myself, or some of the other party leaders as well. I mean, that would be dynamite television. It would be the story, and it would open up lots of new issues, and there would be all sorts of changes to the political agenda as a result of that. Which is why she would never do it. That's why, and they know that. The mainstream parties know that if they engage with the smaller parties, they're just giving us a platform. If they ignore us, then we haven't got that platform. So the strategy makes sense. But definitely. It should be the media's job to say, well, you're not going to get away with that. We're going to let the public hear from these different voices. Now, as I say, even if it's just in proportion to the votes, that would mean we'd be on television, a few times a year before the next election. We would have a chance to take part in a serious political program, an hour's question time or whatever, and people would just be able to see us, be aware of us, whatever. That would be perfectly fair. But they don't do it.
Well, I would just like to say as well, I should have said this right from the start. We will allow anybody from the left, right and centre onto the Guerilla TV channel. We'll let anybody who wants to discuss what they're actually what they want to talk about, and we'll start to. Well, I already, on a personal level, know a lot of the people who are high up on the political parties as well, but I will allow anybody who wants to have a political. You were just fortuitous that you've been the first leader on the Guerilla TV channel, but we will allow anybody from the left, right and centre. We are a free speech channel, so we're happy to listen to everybody's point of view as well, Richard. It's just fortuitous that you were the first person to come on so far, but what I'd like to do in the first part of this highly entertaining get together is, I think it would be beneficial if we know, if the populace know, the voting public know where people are on the political spectrum, and where parties are in particular. Obviously the leader has a great input into what else is happening in the party, and obviously you being the leader, you can't actually have the disparate array of opinions that are going to be in your party, but all we can do is you will have a significance in the way that where the party is positioned, and obviously you've attracted people by your message anyway. So I'll go on to talking about political strategy in a minute, but I would like to go on to actually do a political compass test with you. And what I'd like you to do is just read out the questions and not take it personally. It's not. I'd like you to try and reflect as much where it is for your membership. How large is the party just now, Richard?
It depends how you measure it. Our social media reach is about the same as the number of votes we got.
Oh, is it? Right, okay.
Which is quite an interesting statistic. There's various other ways of measuring this as well. Last summer we did a poll that said 9% of people in Scotland had heard of us. I'm sure if we did one this summer, that's surely got to be, I would guess it'd be over 50% now. I would hope.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I mean, with all these new parties, it's going to take them years and years. When I was involved with the Scottish Libertarian Party, my friend was the first person to stand for them in Glasgow, and he got, I think, 12 or 16 votes. And at this election, now they've got the highest number of votes that they've ever had, and they've got thousands and thousands of votes. I know you've spoke to Anthony, and
yes,
you know Tam. I think probably know Tam as well.
Yes, yeah.
So, but they've certainly grown the party now, and that's starting to, from 16 votes, they've now got thousands. They've got the most votes that they ever had as well. So obviously, there is maybe a desire in some of the Scottish populace for a change, those at the top, and they're starting to drift, but it's going to be maybe it'll be a slow drift and then it'll get faster, but it seems to be like a slow drift away from the existing parties. Just now, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what we have to realise with politics, though, is that there's YouTube and Twitter land, where there's lots of people with all sorts of varied views and there's a really lively debate scene, all sorts of new ideas, and people are very dissatisfied with the mainstream parties. But sadly, I think that's about like less than 5% of the population. The vast majority are just watching a bit of news on the BBC, quick glance at the BBC News website, listen to the radio a little bit here and there, and that's about it.
Oh.
So those people are completely unaware of other perspectives. They're just fed this mainstream diet, and then they go to work and they just get the same philosophy pumped into them from every direction while they're at work as well.
Yeah.
So there's a huge section of people who are just oblivious to alternatives, really.
But this is why I was saying, though, that it will take a period of time to actually. I mean, you can only look at the SNP, who are now in charge. They started off and took them 70 odd years to get to the stage that they're actually in. But I'll come back to the globalist thing later on. But they have progressed and moved up the slippery pole, the slippery political pole as a political entity over the last 70 years. So they've actually, they started off and they were struggling for years and years and years to get any sort of recognition. And it gets to a breaking stage where people get recognition and you start to, these things, people start to get elected. And then there starts to be the change.
Yeah, that's the huge breakthrough. It's just getting the first people elected. I'm sure if we could get a couple of MSPs in the parliament one time, I'm convinced we'd have 8 the time after. Would have been 1 in every region. And therefore, once you've got 8, there's a fair chance you're going to be in a sort of balance of power sort of situation. And also, once you've got 8, the other parties are going to start thinking, right, we need to watch out, because if they get many more, they're going to be eating into our vote. So we better make sure we're just covering some of their territory a little bit. So you start pulling the other parties over a little bit. I mean, like the Greens are doing. I mean, the Greens lead the country. The Greens run the place. Of the party's parliament. And that's why, basically.
There seems to be a decline in the obviously the Conservative Party held fast this term, but there's a continued decline in the Labour Party. I mean, the Labour Party could only get 1 MP elected and 2 MSPs in a constituency vote. So they seem to be declining, as well as the Liberal and Democratic Democrats, and they've lost another seat as well. They're down to 4. So I think the Labour Party and the Liberals may have the next annual conference in a phone box up in Sawton, in the Western Isles.
The Lib Dems are in trouble. If you look at a poll broken down by age across Scotland for the Lib Dems, you'll see they're supporting the over 65s. About the last one, I'm trying to remember, roughly like 11%. All the lower age groups, like 2 or 3, or 1, 2, or 3. So that seems to indicate that unless something changes dramatically, they're done for. Now, people then become Lib Dems naturally as they grow up. Okay, as people grow up, they might become conservatives or whatever. People don't grow up into being Lib Dems. So I think the Lib Dems are in big trouble. They're in long-term decline. In terms of Labour, I mean, I think Anna Sawa has done a good job. I
thought he did a good job, to be honest with you, as well. I thought he ran a good campaign. But I think it's not Anna Sauer that's the issue. I think it's the Labour Party that's the fundamental issue. And I think there's going to be a decline in the Labour Party because it's the Labour Party. Because of, I think there's bigger things that are going to affect the Labour Party. Other than Anna Sauer, who I do agree, I think, like yourself, ran a good campaign.
So it's funny that the history of Scottish politics, isn't it? It's the herd mentality. It used to be like massive Conservative domination for a while. Then it went to total Labour domination.
That's right.
Now it's gone to total SNP domination. I don't quite understand why that is. I mean, I don't think any other part of the UK is like that, but it seems to be the way in Scotland. So maybe that pattern. I think the SNP is over its peak.
I think it's at its peak. I think it's at its peak just now. But whether or not it's on the decline just now, but certainly I struggle to see how they're going to get 65 or more. That was 1 million votes on the list to get 2 MSPs. If that 1 million votes had gone to the Scottish Libertarian Party or the Alba Party, they would have got another 20 to 40 other MSPs. If Nicola Sturgeon had said not to vote for the on the second vote, they got 2, and that did not help the nationalist cause. If they had got a million votes, had gone to the Alba Party or the Scottish Libertarian Party, they could have got between 20 and 40 other nationalist MPs in.
So what's the reason for that, do you think? Do you think people don't understand the system? Or they didn't like Alex Salmond? Or they just do as they're told by Nicola Sturgeon? Because I reckon
all of the above.
An awful lot of people don't really understand the system. Now, again, you can live on Twitter and YouTube, and everyone knows how the DeHaan system works. Everyone realizes you can play the system. But what proportion? I met so many people, came across so many people during the election that really haven't got a clue about the 2 votes. Mm-hmm. So they would even say, right, Scottish Family Party, I won't want to vote for you. You're on the list and the constituency in where I live. So should I vote for you on both, or is it best not to? Is it best to just vote for you on one? Mm-hmm. You have to say, well, no, just vote for us everywhere you can. Mm-hmm. So even at that level, people don't get this. The other thing really interesting I found was, if you look at Edinburgh West, Alex Cole-Hamilton won massively increased majority. Mm-hmm. Obviously, because people are tactically voting. They've worked out, if you want to keep the SNP out, you vote Lib Dem in Edinburgh West. Mm-hmm. But then if you look at the list vote in Edinburgh West, massively Lib Dem. So people have got the message, you vote Lib Dem to keep the SNP out, but then they vote Lib Dem on the list as well. So they don't really understand. Then you look at Edinburgh South, where the message is vote Labour to keep the SNP out. So massive Labour vote. Then look on the list, guess what happens?
Decline.
Loads of people vote Labour on the list.
Oh.
So it's as though they don't understand that the tactical voting bit should be with your first vote. Then with your second vote, you should vote for whichever party you like. But people are obviously not getting the message.
No. I
don't think so. The whole system should be scrapped. Just have proportional representation. Then I'd be an MSP now.
Well, I agree with you. But what about proportional rather than that? Why not proportional representation on the regional vote? We could do it.
Yes, that would be. Well, the problem with that is you just have a massive SNP majority. If it was if the regional was just proportional representation, it wouldn't serve the purpose of trying to make it overall more proportional. You can make it a national list instead of a regional list, which would make it a lot fairer. So instead of needing like 7% to get someone elected, you might need 1%.
Yeah.
That would be much, much fairer.
Yeah, and I think it would be preferable as well, because what that would do is allow different voices into the Scottish Parliament rather than this oligopoly that is appearing to happen just now as well, Richard.
Yeah. So if we had a national list, Alex Salmond would be an MSP. George Galloway, borderline. The thing is, if it was a national list, people would vote differently. Because I think what happened to All for Unity is a lot of people liked the idea, but then they saw the opinion polling, saw that it wasn't going to work, so they didn't vote for them. So that's why it flopped in the end. But if people thought, right, there's a national list, this is realistic, all these small parties, they are in with a real chance, more people would vote for them.
Yeah.
So the figures you see underrepresent the actual support for these parties. Even for Alba, I would say that. Because with Alba, it was obvious that the game was up from opinion polls. It wasn't going to work. If the opinion polls had been, say, 7% for Alba, or 7% for All for Unity, maybe they would have got it. But it's
wasn't happening. Yeah, it wasn't happening. And really, that sort of the challenge for all the smaller parties is to break through in such an extent that they're going to get 4 to 5%. They really have to start to chisel into the 5 main parties. But
and the non-voters as well.
I could say that again, Richard. Sorry.
And the non-voters.
I mean, the non-voters are massive. I mean, that's 37% of people couldn't be bothered to go and put an X in the box. And really, I think that has to be, we have to find out, are these people apolitical? Do they just don't understand politics? Do they not understand where the people, and this is one of the reasons I want to do the political compass test, do they not know where the different people are in the political spectrum? Do they not know what the underlying policies of the different parties? Can they not really be bothered? Because people are getting shot in a battlefield and blowing up for the right to put an X in a box, and they can't be bothered going along to the polling station. So
I've got some sympathy for people who say, look, I'm just not interested in politics. I don't understand it. I've got no rational reason to choose any of them. So I'm happy to leave it to everyone else to decide. I think that's sort of okay. The other thing is the people who look at the options, they watch politics on TV, whatever, see things in the news, and think, I don't want to vote for any of those. So they don't vote. And they don't make the efforts to find out about the other parties.
Yeah.
So they just don't vote. And then, as you say, there's lots of people. The other thing as well, there's a substantial proportion of people who are basically not competent to vote. That they're not, mental health problems or whatever. There's a lot of people who are, a substantial number who really aren't capable of making the decision. But there are a lot of people who, just can't be bothered. It's lazy. Another thing is just total cynicism. You get some people, you say to them, we're a new political party in Scotland. Well, the last thing we need is another one of those. They're all terrible. Yeah, but we're a new one. I mean, if you think they're all terrible, surely you should be welcoming a new one. No, but you're going to be just the same as the others. How do you know? Oh, well, they're all the same, aren't they? But that's not uncommon.
But see, the voter is sort of correct, because as we pointed out earlier on, the media is used as the stopgap. I thought the media was there to hold the politicians to account, but I think the reality is the media are there. Are there to actually make sure that the same politicians get in. So that's why, because it's like this a merry-go-round of the similar politicians, the public do think they're all the same, because a lot of them are, and I'll come into that later on when I'm discussing policy with you.
I'll say that the media, BBC in particular, the BBC does hold politicians to account. They make sure that they're doing things according to the BBC's own agenda. So if a politician is straying from what the BBC wants, they will really call them to account and give them a very hard time. But if they're on track with the BBC, then they'll have a nice friendly interview and a pat on the back.
Well, it's about time the BBC were privatised. What's the thoughts are you for as the part? I don't really want to talk about policy in this part of the section, but I will be doing this. So should the BBC be privatised, or should they be on a subscription model, or should they stay the same? From the family party's point of view.
Family party policies go to a subscription.
Is it?
So pay for it if you want it.
You'd be better just privatising it then, would you not?
Sorry?
Would you not just be better privatising it then?
I think the idea of the thing with that is, I think the idea of a public service broadcaster is a good thing. Can unite the nation, produce quality content that's a bit educational and culturally enlifting or whatever. So there's a value in that. And if it actually had to face market forces in the sense that if people didn't like it, they didn't pay. Like if that was introduced now, what people would opt out immediately? What percentage would opt out straight away?
Well, I don't know. There would be a good few as well. Probably as many people that don't vote.
I would imagine they'd lose a good
third, maybe
20 or 30%. I'm looking at younger people coming through. Like my sons, it's not like they don't know what television is, but the idea of watching television is just not on their agenda at all.
That's right.
Okay, if you're watching a live sport event, you have to be there at the right time. Mm-hmm. But everything else, the idea that what time such and such a thing on, or what's on iPlayer, it's just not in their thinking at all. So they're done for. In any case.
Yeah, well, I said this a couple of years ago, and it looks like Boris Johnson and the rest of the political class are very slow in this issue. They're not being quick enough to actually see that this was going to be a problem due to the changes in broadcasting, even through YouTube or other various different methods now of broadcasting. I mean, I can broadcast now. I've got my camera, my phone is now my camera, and I'm doing nearly as good a production as, okay, I've got other things here to actually make it better, but the fact is I'm doing nearly as good a production of multi-million pound studios, developments, they've got different staff doing that, and I'm just, as a police officer said to me, just one bloke with an iPhone, and I'm able to actually then transmit and do whatever any of they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm getting some edgy stuff.
That's a huge breakthrough. The Scottish Family Party, what would we have done without social media?
Mm-hmm.
We'd be sunk.
Yeah, well, it would certainly been a lot longer lead-in time. I mean, as I said to you, the Scottish Libertarian Party started with 16 votes, and now they've got nearly, I think they were close on 5,000 or something like that. So they've increased exponentially, and they've started like yourself. I think they were one of the second or third largest number of first past the post votes as well. So it takes a lot longer. So you wouldn't have probably been sunk, but you probably wouldn't have been the 8th biggest party in the country at this point, though, Richard, would you?
Yeah. So it is amazing. But on the other hand, social media, I mean, they're against us. We've had trouble with all of them: Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. I mean, Facebook's restricted our page all the way through the election campaign. To the point where at one stage, if you went to like our page, you click like, a message would come up saying, "Are you sure?"
Well, I've been banned.
See what these people share.
I've been banned on Facebook. I have been the Guerilla TV channel's been stopped for asking questions on Twitter. I think we're being shadow banned on YouTube. So. But this must be coming from our political class. There's no way that Silicon Valley, if our political class said, no, you're not doing that here, or there'll be ramifications, wouldn't stop it. There's been allegations about Sir Nick Clegg of the illiberal, undemocratic Democrats working in cahoots with Silicon Valley to ban people, and now obviously parties that they want to actually try and silence and stop the onslaught onto the 5 predominant globalist parties, as I'll come on to later on. Yeah,
it's very frustrating. I'll tell you what happened on our Facebook page. We got restricted on Facebook. And the reason was I posted a YouTube video on it. It was about SNP indoctrination in schools. And they said, this is hate speech. So I appealed and said, what are you on about? It's completely real. There's nothing hateful in it. But they stuck to the guns. And then about 2 years later, I'd forgotten about that. I posted the same video again by mistake. And straight away, hate speech. All they appealed, nothing happened. I then checked. That same video that they're objected to on YouTube is actually on Facebook as a Facebook video. But I don't think a human being has ever looked at the Scottish Family Party page. I think it counts up the number of people who report things. It detects some keywords. That's about it.
But I mean, that hate speech, the hate speech, and as I've obviously watched your videos, and I've watched previous ones, and you've covered this. It's just an attack on freedom of speech. It's like sticks and stones. You should be able to take criticism and insults. It seems a very self-entitled middle class sort of attitude that I'm not meant to be insulted. Somehow you're God's special little child.
It was amazing in the election campaign. We got a leaflet delivered through every door in Scotland. Well, it should have been. Royal Mail only did about 70% of them. But leaflet through every door. And our leaflet had some of our key policies on. And the number of people who got in touch saying, I've reported this to the police as hate speech.
Wow.
Do you not realise it's illegal for you to put this through my door? How dare you put this through my door?
What were they specifically objecting to?
Well, the two things were, it was the pro-life message, and it was the we oppose transgender ideology, especially the confusing of children. It was on our leaflet. Now, we knew people that sort of hit the roof about that, but they genuinely do believe that there's something called hate speech, and they think they know what it is, and they think the police should come and arrest you.
Yeah, that's Stalinist.
That culture's been there for a long time now. So the hate speech legislation is just the icing on the cake, really.
Yeah.
That's just bringing reality to what people seem to have believed for quite a long time now.
Yeah, but I mean, that's almost Stalinist. So if you don't agree with me, we're going to arrest you. That's absolutely disgusting. I'm absolutely disgusted by Nicola Sturgeon being the First Minister now after that. But I mean, she's done so many things. She's increasingly becoming authoritarian, out of touch. But I'll get into that later on as well. So, without further ado, we've actually banged on here for nearly... I told you we were going to do this easily, Richard. We've banged on for 40 minutes and we're just at the introduction. So... Well, without any further ado, let's crack on with this. And then we can start to structure it better. And I will. Here we go. So let me take that. In fact, I'll actually leave that there. So, can you see this okay, Richard? Yeah?
I can, yes,
So, I would just like you to, obviously this is the test, so this can be done for you as an individual or for the political parties. In fact, they'll probably use, if I get all the various party leaders to actually do this on behalf of the party, Political Compass might use this as a more precise definition of where the political parties actually are on the political spectrum. So, if you could do me a favour, is that a good position for you? Can you see everything okay there?
Yes, that's good, yeah, that's right.
If you can just read it out and just sort of surmise on behalf of your party what you think either the party's already agreed or the party would agree, because some of them are quite abstract. So this will be quite interesting.
Okay then. Right, if economic globalization is inevitable, should it primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations? Is anyone really going to say, no, it shouldn't serve humanity. It should just serve the interests of transnational corporations? I mean, that question is, there's only one possible answer. So the answer is going to be strongly agree. What that means in practice is very debatable.
And have you done this before, Richard?
I've done some of it before, yeah.
So the questions are somewhat abstract, but I couldn't believe the accuracy. They've got me down as a libertarian liberal or a classical liberal, a centrist libertarian, basically. And I can't believe how accurate the actual definition or the actual positioning is from these questions, some of which are abstract. So carry on.
I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. Right, that's a debatable one. It's like saying, would you support your brother, whether it was right or wrong? So if your brother committed a murder, would you still support him in the sense that you would, go and see him and try and be the person speaking up on his behalf or whatever? Yes, you would try and do that. So would you take the same attitude to your country? Yes, to some extent. Now, this is not really Scottish family party stuff, so we don't really get into that.
No, but I'll give what it does. What it does is it'll give, even though this is why these questions are abstract, but I would like you to try and get it from where the party may come from with for this, because it will give us a position for the party as a whole, even though these questions are abstract, which I do agree.
Right, I would say agree, but what I mean that doesn't mean you don't criticise the country, doesn't mean that you don't oppose what it does, but you still support it in the sense that you've still got a sense of loyalty towards it. So I'd go for an agree. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. Right, I would say from a Scottish family point of view, we say a common national identity is important. So we'd go for a disagree on that one. So we're out of sync there. You did the one after the one I was talking about?
Yeah. Oh, did I? So I did. Oh, so I did. So
that should be a disagree.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be there. Right, carry on. Yeah, we will change that once it goes back.
Our race has many superior qualities compared to other races. I would say strongly disagree. I think there is a sensible discussion to have in there, but the way that's phrased is quite objectionable. Next one. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I would say disagree. Probably on that one. Right. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Again, Scottish Family Party would have no opinion at all, so I'll just have to give my personal one. I would say agree. International law doesn't exist in the way that some people think it does. When there's international law, they mean the will of the UN. Mm-hmm. And the UN can make mistakes.
I'll come back to the globalist agenda later on.
Yeah. There's now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Well, there is that fusion. Is it worrying? Worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I would say disagree. I don't think that fusion is worrying. It can be a good thing if people take in more information because it's made entertaining. So yeah, that's quite open-ended. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Again, no family party view really, but I would go for a disagree on that. The reason I go for that, if you look at the history of the world, clashes between, well, recent history, clashes between classes are quite rare. Clashes between nations are more common, right? Okay, controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Well, I suppose the question is assuming that they're two different things. If you don't control inflation, does that not lead to unemployment? Again, family party, no view. I would struggle with that one as well, but I'll go for an agree, taking a long-term perspective. Right, because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require legislation. Strongly agree. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Agree. Okay, and moderation, not two extremes, right? The freer the market, the freer the people. I would go for an in-between if there was one. But I'll go for freer the market, the freer the people. I'll go for an agree. Okay, freedom isn't the only benefit to people. There might be other disadvantages, but maybe freedom is an advantage, okay? It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. Strongly disagree. Don't see any problem with that. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Okay, not really family party. Well, the home ownership, we're in favour of home ownership. Anyway, strongly disagree. Yeah. It's regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Right. Many fortunes made by people who simply manipulate money. I would argue that in most cases they do contribute something to their society because the function of these financial markets is important. And the fact that they exist helps the economy, not just because they make money out of it, but they're necessary in the economy. So is that regrettable? I would tend to say maybe go with an agree. It would be, I think the nation would be a better place if more of the brain power that goes into making money in sort of complex financial systems, if that brain power went into making things and inventing things or whatever, that would probably be better for everyone. Right, the next one. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Again, not really a family party issue. I would go for agree. Sometimes necessary. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Strongly disagree. Surely everyone would strongly disagree with that. I mean, if they're like poisoning the river and whatever, right, the rich are too highly taxed. Again, this family party, no policy. I would go for, and I'd probably go for the middle if there was one, but forced to one side or the other. I would maybe go for disagree, but that doesn't mean I'd want the tax to be higher. I'm just saying I don't think it's necessarily too high, maybe about right. Right, thirdly, the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Should have access. Right, I don't object to private healthcare. Again, not a Scottish Family Party issue, so I'll go for an agree on that. Governments should penalise businesses that mislead the public. Pot calling the kettle black or what? Penalise businesses that mislead the public. Yes, strongly agree, and that does happen in some cases. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Right, that's just a question of theory. It's not anything about what I think. It's just a theoretical question. Requires restrictions. I would say strongly disagree. Abortion, where the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Strongly agree. All authority should be questioned. Again, that's a funny question. Depends what you mean by questioned. I think some authority should be respected and accepted. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be questioned. So I'd go for agree. I feel like that might be misinterpreted by the computer, but I'll go for an agree. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, not literally, but the idea that punishment should be in proportion to the crime. So what I'm taking from that is punishment in proportion to the crime. That would be in line with Scottish Family Party policy. So that would be an agree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theatres or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I disagree. I think there are important things in society and in culture, and I think it's to the benefit of anyone and to the nation that they're subsidised in some cases. Right, schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Strongly disagree. Strongly disagree.
Oh, sorry. Well spoken.
Is that right, the one above?
Strongly disagree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Right. All people have their rights, but it's better for all of us. The different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Disagree. I don't mind people. Freedom of association is fine, but I think a united sense of community is positive as well. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Now, again, family party policy, we're against the smacking ban, but we don't have an opinion whether it's a good or a bad thing to smack children. But I would go for agree on that one. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Agree. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offence. Strongly disagree. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Middling. Prime function to equip the future generation to find jobs. And maybe say disagree. But it is a very important part of education. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. That's not a question I've looked into. Not be allowed to. So it's not about advising people, it's about what they're allowed to do. So I think I would say disagree. Again, it's not family party policy. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I'm not sure it's the most important thing, but it is a very important thing. So if I have to, so I suppose if it's not the most important thing, then I've got to say disagree, haven't I? So disagree, yeah. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. I would disagree with that. I think all cultures are not the same. Some cultures are more admirable than some others. There's some parts of the world, countries I would like to live in, there's others I wouldn't like to live in. And that question reflects the difference between them to some extent. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. Strongly agree.
Strongly agree.
When you're troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Now, family party policy, we do talk about like the therapeutic culture in schools, where it's all about navel gazing and counselling and emotions and feelings, rather than just getting on with things. So maybe even from a family party point of view, we would veer towards the trying to correct the imbalance by going on the agree side on that. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. Strongly disagree. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Strongly disagree. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Agree.
So I'm deliberately keeping stum just now because I don't want to influence, do any influence on what your direction is here. So it's all basically you.
Right. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counter-terrorism. I mean, when this was written, that was maybe the live issue. I mean, coronavirus has come and overtaken it tenfold, hasn't it? Civil liberties excessively curbed. I would say disagree with that. Again, it's not family party policy, but that's maybe my personal view. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Now, that's a funny question. Now, is that question true? Is that an advantage of a one-party state? Yes, it is. The disadvantage is you'll often end up in tyranny and it end up absolutely atrocious. But is that statement true? Yes, it is. So agree. Even though I don't think a one-party state is a good thing at all, that statement is true. Right, although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. I would disagree with that, and that would be the family party point of view as well, because the state is not very good at working out who's a wrongdoer or not. They can't tell the difference between a wrongdoer and someone who doesn't agree with them. Right, the death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Family party has no policy. What's my view? I'll probably go for a disagree. When I hear arguments against the death penalty, I normally think they're not very good. But then when you see it in operation, it doesn't seem to that doesn't seem to work out too well either. But anyway, I go for a disagree. That's something I wanted to change. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Right, that makes that sound a bit authoritarian. But ultimately, for a civil society, there has got to be that element in it. What do you mean by people above? Well, the government. I would go for an agree with that. We want an orderly society. We want law and order. I mean, that's effectively what that's saying. So, okay. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Now, the Family Party does have a policy about art, actually, not about art in general, about government funding for art. And it says the funding should go to the accessible, uplifting, ennobling, etc. If it doesn't represent anything, shouldn't be considered art at all, I would go for a disagree. Disagree. No, not strongly disagree, just disagree.
Okay.
In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. We do have a policy on that because the trend is away from punishment as a concept at all. Is punishment more important than rehabilitation? I would say strongly agree. It's the fundamental consideration in criminal justice. Rehabilitation is secondary. So, right, it's a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. Right, you can take that two ways. There will be some criminals where the time to rehabilitate them, time trying to rehabilitate them, will ultimately have been wasted because it doesn't work. But was it a waste of time to try because you didn't know if it was going to work or not? So it's a waste of time to try to rehabilitate, so I disagree with that. It's always worth trying. Right, the business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I would disagree. That doesn't mean I think the opposite, but I'll disagree with that statement. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Right, what will the Scottish Family Party have to say about that? Well, our policy is designed to give families the choice. So we're not telling anyone what they should or shouldn't do, but we're wanting to give people the options to do what they want to do. And often it is mothers who want to be homemakers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Now, if that was slightly phrased differently, the Family Party would have been able to agree with that. My personal opinion would be that I think it is natural for mothers to be homemakers, to nurture their own children. I think that's a good thing. So I'll veer on my personal view rather than the Family Parties and go for agree on that one. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Unethically, agree.
Why is that?
I think a lot of developing countries are unethically taking money from multinational companies as well in these things. Right, the next one. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Disagree. I think we need to be willing to be the odd one out, to challenge authority, challenge the establishment. Right, astrology accurately explains many things. Strongly disagree. That's not a Family Party policy. You can be moral without being religious. Agree? Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I would strongly agree with that. Actually, again, I can't think of a Family Party policy that's relevant, but I just think the personal touch, the genuine engagement is much better with a charity. Right, some people are naturally unlucky. Strongly disagree.
Disagree. Oh, I disagree, yeah. Strongly disagree, Ken.
It's important that my child's school instills religious values. Right, that's the right me. I would tend to go for but it depends if the child's school is capable of doing it. So would I like the school to, in the ideal circumstances, if I thought they could do it well, then yes. If I thought they couldn't, then no. Is it important that my child's school instills religious values? I would go for an agree, personal viewpoint. Scottish Family, actually, we'll go for a disagree. Scottish Family Party policy has got nothing about religious education at all. So a disagree. Right, next one. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Right, my personal opinion, Yes, family party opinion. We don't have one, but we do promote marriage as I want to teach young people about the benefits of marriage as the context for sexual relationships. So the Scottish Family Party would revere, it's not a moral view though, really. I feel agree would best reflect our position, but technically it wouldn't. Usually immoral. So I think the Family Party would go for a disagree. A same-sex couple in a stable living relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Now, the Family Party's policy is that heterosexual couples should be given priority. In other words, that should be counted as a positive in adoption decisions. So does that mean that same-sex couples should not be excluded? So our policies actually agree with that. We would not exclude them, it's just we give priority to heterosexual couples. Again, that's probably given the computer completely the wrong impression. Anyway, pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Agree. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Right, so Family Party point of view. I would say disagree, because it has consequences. For example, the state's often left picking up the pieces of the results of that. So next one. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Disagree. That question is a bit ambiguous. So there's not an easy answer to that question.
No, there's not. I think it's done deliberately. I think these are done deliberately to be ambiguous. But it seems to, for me, it's an incredible thing because it seems to formulate on a correct point, political point.
They try and kick you off the fence, don't they?
Yeah.
Right. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Strongly agree.
So I would have thought before we started, so I'll just press that now, and it'll be very interesting to find out where the Family Party is in the political spectrum. But I thought the Family Party would be mildly conservative, so the centre-right authoritarian, and that's where I thought it was going to be. But I'll be very interested. Do you have any thoughts of where you think you're going to be in the political compass?
I'm not sure. The one thing I'd say there is maybe about a third of the questions the Family Party doesn't have a stance on, because we're neutral on a lot of issues. Yeah. So about a third of them, it was more personal, but we'll be interested.
Yeah. Let's have a look. So do you understand? I mean, obviously, people just use the left-right dichotomy, whereas the political compass gives depth to authoritarianism and libertarianism, just in case. So obviously, this is the left libertarian, Marxism, National Bolshevism, National Socialism, are all in the left authoritarian. Now, I think the Family Party are going to be in the right authoritarian. I'm down here as a liberal, so that in the centre is obviously the liberal part, and obviously going into the far left and the far right. So I'm basically a 2 in, 4 down, 2 in, and I'm a libertarian liberal, centre right libertarian liberal. So so that's just to give you a sort of understanding. So the libertarian left, I think the Green Party might be in here somewhere, but I would like to get somebody from the Green Party to go through and do exactly what you've just done as well. And I think the Scottish Libertarian Party are a minarchist party, so they're slightly towards the centre. And I think there's space just now. Maybe the Freedom Alliance might fall in here as well. It'd be funny if you actually ended up in as a Libertarian Party. The
Libertarian Party would end up right at the very bottom of the Libertarian axis, wouldn't they?
Well,
the Greens would be up top left, wouldn't they?
Well, I'm not quite sure where the Greens are, but I mean, there's a lot in here. I would say Nicola Sturgeon's definitely in here. I think she's a postmodernist Marxist. So that's just a sort of North Korea, China up in the authoritarian, Saudi Arabia and Singapore is authoritarian. Cuba and Switzerland is far right. That's quite interesting. I've not seen this before. Oh my goodness. That is a turn up for the books. So your political compass. So you are actually centre-left, moderately libertarian. That's an incredible. I thought you were up here. So that is.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that's fascinating.
It's a strange mixture. Because when I hear libertarian, I agree with a lot of it. But there are some bits where the family party would be seen as quite authoritarian. It's not saying just leave people to it to do whatever they like and things are going to work out just fine. People need some boundaries, some structure, whatever. So a bit of a mixture. And the left-right we try and stay out of in general. So that's quite encouraging that it comes out.
So you're actually on the left. And so I'm here. So this is me. So this is as I said to you, in the centre is the Liberals. So Social Democrats, authoritarian Social Democrats, Liberals, Christian Democrats, same, but these are obviously from authoritarian. Same down here at the bottom here. So I would be in the sort of centrist, liberal, right, libertarian. So there is a requirement for a political party down here. I think Freedom Alliance might be down here as well. People for Freedom Alliance. I'm going to try and get the leader to come on and do this with me as well. So we might be seeing more actual libertarian parties. So that I find that I know a lot of people may be going, what's the big deal? But for me, that's fascinating. The family party is actually a left of centre party. Obviously, the black line down the middle is the centre. You're actually very close to the centre of politics, but slightly on the libertarian left. Did you think that was going to be where you were?
Yeah, I think with the authoritarian, like freedom of speech is one of our core principles. State interference in family life, completely against it. So these are really strong libertarian themes. But if you're pro-life, that's generally seen as very authoritarian. Or if you're saying anything other than there should be like sexual free-for-all. People can just live as they please, and that's all going to be fine. Have kids wherever they feel like. Whereas we'd argue against that. So that's a more authoritarian line. So I'm not surprised that they were coming out with a blender there. The left and right, so we tend to keep out of most mainstream left-right issues. And I say the questions that came up. Yeah, I suppose it was a blender. It seemed to me that I was giving what seemed to be the obvious answer to the questions. It was difficult to see how anyone could actually give the opposite answer without really condemning themselves as quite unreasonable. It seemed that way with quite a lot of the questions. So it seemed like there was only one sensible. Even though I was thinking, I think the computer might be getting the wrong end of the stick. I think maybe it's thinking I mean something else by this than what I actually mean. But,
I think there was sort of double entendres from what was actually being said and what your implications on what was actually being said that could narrowly change it. But I don't know about you, but I'm actually fascinated with the fact that this is where you are on the political spectrum. I mean, that to me is, because I would have put you as an authoritarian, slightly centre-right party. But I mean, it's fascinating. And maybe because you're relatively close to me on the political spectrum, that I had some resonance in what you were actually saying when I was listening to you as well. I listened to people from across the political spectrum, but it was very interesting. Obviously what you were saying had some resonance. I'm probably more libertarian than you in the fact I'm more believe in more of a free-for-all and don't have these these constraints put on me. But obviously a slightly centre-left social libertarian, that to me is fascinating. And I'm sure that Nicola Sturgeon is somewhere up here in quite far left authoritarianism. Unfortunately, I think that's the situation there.
Well, that's the Scottish Parliament in general, isn't it? It's just getting pulled up to the top left by the Greens. I would say. And the idea is there's one true truth. So the objective of the government is to educate the people to appreciate the wisdom of the one true truth and to live their lives accordingly. So partly we've got to drum the message into them, and partly we've got to narrow the rails on either side so that there's less room for manoeuvre and they have to live the way that we want them to.
Yeah. A personalised political compass certificate showing your own position is available online. Join 27 caricatures of your most loved and loathed political figure in personalised colour certificates that you can download and print in the moment. It's a beautiful design by cartoonist Malcolm Evans. £5, Malcolm Evans, help us. Small donation. Yeah, so I mean, I'm really glad we did that. I don't know if you found it useful, Richard, as well.
It's interesting. Well, when I did that, I didn't do all of it. I did a lot of it another time. And the question, I thought either the person writing these questions hasn't really thought it through, or they've really done this very intelligently and they've found out these are the questions that actually elicit the information that they want.
I don't know how they do it. I mean, I'll put up mine because I've done mine.
It's quite a heavyweight thing, isn't it? It's not like something someone's made up to stick on the internet to make money. It's something with quite a bit of academic credibility, isn't it? I think?
It's an incredible thing. Let me just Guerilla TV. Now, so I left the Scottish Libertarian Party because and can you see that, Richard? Okay, yeah. So
I can't see anything on the screen at the moment.
Oh, do you know what? Right, well, let me just share that for you. Let me just do this. So can you see it now?
Yes,
So this is my political compass. So you can see that you're actually here, and I'm probably in this sort of general area as well. So I left the Scottish Libertarian Party because there was a lot of anarcho capitalists, and they were moving into the minarchist sort of area. So it was on the left, and I'm very much more of a centrist libertarian in the centre. I mean, you're probably even closer as a political entity, but this is my personal political compass test, and it was sort of eye-opening for me to find out where I am and what my beliefs were, because I was in the Conservative Party when I was younger, and it wasn't a good ideological fit. And to find out that I'm actually a libertarian liberal, it was quite a revelation for me as well. And I think the thought of the Family Party, which I would have thought was up here in the authoritarian blue section, is actually a libertarian party.
Yeah, people sometimes they come across the Family Party and they think, right, this must be the Scottish version of the American Christian right. But we're not. At all. We're not in that mold at all. We're very different.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think it's absolutely fascinating, and it'll be great to go through other political parties and actually find out where they are. I mean, I would love to do the SNP under Nicola Sturgeon to find out where exactly she was on the political, and the fact that you're not even a right of centre party, you're sort of a centre left party. To me, again, is absolutely incredible to be bottom left. I would have never have thought that. Never placed you there at all.
You're going to have a fascinating chart by the end of all these interviews, aren't you? When you speak
well, see, the difference is that this company, or whatever it is, whoever invented this, I don't know who did it, but they're brilliant, invented this. They do the political compass for Britain, or they do it for different things. But if I can get the leaders of the political parties, I'm going to get the most accurate reflection of the underlying political entities that's going to be available, because there's nobody else who's probably gone through got the leaders to do the on behalf of the parties to actually get the proper placings. Because I'm sure, if somebody was just trying to do this by not actually speaking to you, not having the knowledge and trying to piece it together, having to go through your manifestos and not understanding completely your membership, and some of the questions are abstract, they wouldn't really be able to place, they wouldn't get an accurate placement. This is going to be the most accurate placement that we can actually get, and it'll be fascinating to do Tam Laird doing the Scottish Libertarian Party and the rest.
If the Scottish Libertarians are not right at the bottom,
I really
don't know who would be.
I think the Scottish Libertarians are somewhere in the middle here. I think they're minicus, so I think it would be somewhere here. There are some anarcho, Tony's an anarcho capitalist, so there are some minarchists as well. So it is to the right, but as I said, I'm more of a centrist. Sargon of Akkad and Count Dankula as well are pretty much in this sort of area as well. So these are two very interesting political entities in themselves. So, I'd like to skip on now. That's good. I told you we would fly through this. I told you we'd be having far too much fun. But I think that's great that we can actually now get a place for the family planning party. The family party actually on the political compass. And I don't think anybody would have seen that you're actually a centre-left political entity, which I think is incredible, isn't it? I think it's incredible, because I don't think I would never have placed you there myself, and you'd probably get more votes actually being placed there as well, Richard.
Well, our idea is we don't want to put people off with policies outside our central core values. We want to be able to be as accepting and appealing as possible. Whereas we said, we want dramatic tax cuts or tax rises, which really start cutting off sections of our support. Basically, we need a large proportion of the socially conservative votes to come our way. So we can't afford to be slicing through it on secondary issues.
Well, so this is where we want to go. So now I would like to discuss what are the main policies, and this is where I'll speak to you on policy and actual policy from the family planning perspective. The family planning, I keep saying it, family party perspective, and find out, and then we'll go on to talk about strategy and how the future is going to look after that. So, is the family party a British party? Is it a Scottish party?
It's a Scottish party. Yeah, we started in Scotland. We own the rights, if you like, with the Electoral Commission for the family party name throughout Britain. And there's been stirrings of a family party in Wales, maybe in London as well, in England. If ever some people came along who'd got what it took to really get the ball rolling, then we would happily have brother, sister parties, whatever, in other parts of the UK. Well, basically, our vision is to be a Scottish party, and our target is the Scottish Parliament. That's the level where our policies are most relevant. So, yeah, very definitely Scottish. Are you a unionist or an independent, or do you believe in more power to the Scottish? Devo Max, where are you on the tertiary issues with regards to the Scottish Parliament, or do you want to abolish the Scottish Parliament? Where's the family party policy on that? That's a tongue twister. As far as I'm aware, our policy is unique in that we're neutral on Scottish independence. But our policy at the last election was that if we had MSPs in the Parliament, they would vote against a referendum for the duration of this Parliament.
Okay.
Because the last one wasn't that long ago. We've got the coronavirus issue to deal with. And also support for independence. There's not a clear majority for independence.
No.
It's not a good way forward to a country to have a knife-edge referendum where you just get over the edge. And, it's virtually 50-50. It's not a recipe for a harmonious future for a nation.
Yeah.
But let's say at the time of the next Scottish election, let's say support for Scottish independence has been at like 65% for 2 years solid. Then we would probably go into the next election saying, okay, we would support a referendum. If there was a referendum, we wouldn't campaign in it either way. But so basically, we're not for or against a referendum even in general. We just think there should be a referendum when there's a clear majority in favour of Scottish independence. I think for the Scottish Family Party, Scottish independence would be a big boost for us because we are a genuinely Scottish party. And I think the Labour, Lib Dem and the Conservatives would all really suffer having to break themselves away from the mother party. I don't think that would play well with the electorate, whereas we're an authentic Scottish party. So I think that would really help us. The other thing as well, Scotland became independent. The problem you have is you get Scottish news and UK news. UK news is all Labour and Conservatives and a bit of SNP. And, we've got no profile at all in that, or in UK elections. But if that was gone, then you can make more of an impact if you're based just in Scotland, if Scotland was independent. But personally, I'm a unionist for various reasons, but the Scottish Family Party is neutral. So we've got unionists and nationalists in our ranks.
What's your policy on a Devo Max referendum? Now, I agree with you, looking at it from a neutral political commentary point of view and a neutral political point of view, that if the SNP do go for another referendum and they fail to actually get the referendum, and it looks very evenly split just now, and people might be upset that they're getting forced to get asked the same question again, because people don't like getting asked the same question again. However, there could be a case for a Devo Max referendum, which may be a lot more palatable and a lot more desirable for a larger part. So you might actually win a Devo Max referendum, which would then mean that the unionists wouldn't split the union, but you would get increased control over the economy, and we would increase the opportunities for business growth and other opportunities there. Would the Family Party support a Devo Max referendum?
We don't run any policy on that. My personal view would be, I think their devolution is a good thing. The Scottish Parliament is already pretty powerful, but I think if it actually became accountable for its own finances, so we could get out of I don't think there's any way out of the blaming Westminster, they don't give us enough money type thing, because ultimately, as long as Scotland's in the UK in any form, they'll be paying towards defence and various other things. And Scottish nationalists would always claim that that's too much money is being paid. It's not fair if we weren't in the union. So I think the idea that some sort of Devo Max would kill off Scottish nationalism, I think that's just the same argument again.
I should clarify. I didn't think it'll kill off Scottish nationalism, but what it would do is give more powers, but it would be something that might be winnable as a referendum. I agree with you that I don't necessarily, it's sort of on a knife edge if Scotland would vote to be independent now again, but if the SNP brought forward a Devo Max, it would do what you just said there and make sure that we controlled our own taxation and things like that as well. So
it would be a step towards independence then.
But I mean, it could be an either or, and they could get independence. So if you're a sort of unionist and that was a sort of halfway house, is that not better than actually if they do get independence by not having more control just now?
Yeah, I think to my mind it's so clearly a stepping stone to independence, because the argument for union has got to go along the lines of like national solidarity. We're one people. We're us, the people of the United Kingdom. So we all pay money into a pot and we divide it up and we pay welfare, we pay for the National Health Service. We're all in this together. We share risks. We look after each other. But that's where that's an important part of the sense of national identity. The more things get devolved to Scotland, the weaker that argument becomes. We're already at the point when people think NHS, who provides the NHS? Well, it's Scotland. You don't feel an attachment to the United Kingdom because of the NHS, because it's just Scotland. When it comes to defence, who defends our borders and keeps us safe, or who's supposed to? Well, that's the British Armed Forces. So that is a pull towards unionism. But if you imagine as part of, say, a Devo Max, I know you wouldn't have this, but imagine they had, say, Scotland had its own military, then again, that would weaken people's sense of solidarity with the United Kingdom. So I think Devo Max, I think it's a great idea, but same as with devolution, within the context of a strong nationalist movement, it's just going to be played to that end.
But the difficulty
is really strengthen the hand of the nationalists.
The difficulty is that if there's not sort of a halfway house, the house could get burnt down. Do you know what I mean? So it gives that sort of, if you do the Devo Max, it may not completely stop the devolution, but it may give more powers where there's a greater autonomy, and it may reduce that sort of requirement for that to break away completely.
I suppose what I'm imagining the sort of flag waving. I don't mean fanatical in a pejorative sense, but the real hardcore independence campaigner. I mean, they're not going to be happy until it's just total and utter independence. If there's the slightest thread of attachment, they're not happy. Scotland has to be an independent country, full stop. So they won't be happy with any sort of arrangement apart from full independence. But is there a section of the electorate whose views are more moderate than that, who could be won over to a sort of equilibrium position with Devo Max? Possibly. But I think as long as you've got nationalists within the system, they're still going to say whatever the connection to the UK is, they'll still be arguing that's what's holding Scotland back. Mm-hmm. If we could just stop that, then we'd be free to go and do our own things or whatever.
But I think it would strengthen.
I would fear it would go that way.
I think it could strengthen potential unionist arguments that they would stay within the union, but they would then have Devo Max where they would have much greater control over economics and other things. So you could maybe still retain the British Army, but there might be some sort of autonomy within the British Army, but you would still retain that. You would still retain other aspects that wouldn't be under the Devo Max thing. So there would still be that element of British still retain the pound, and they still have a common trading, common area. So there would be a lot of advantage, but you would then get the powers to be able to change the economy, which are now reserved down at Westminster as well. So there are I could see benefits of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. There's great benefits, but you're just going to imagine a Nicola Sturgeon though reacting to it all the time.
But she might see the thing with Nicola Sturgeon is, or with the SNP generally. I forget Nicola Sturgeon just now, but the SNP. If the SNP do get a second referendum, or the nationalist movement do get a second referendum, and they lose, they could become like Quebecois in Canada, where they had two referendums and then they started being an actual political entity. To move the nationalist thing down the road, or for them to actually, in case they have to win the next referendum, it's sort of you're 1-0 down, and you have to win this because you're. I agree. You can get it. So you would probably be better going for a Devo Max where you actually won one or got half a goal back than losing a second referendum, which may cause you severe problems from the SNP's point of view.
So the Alba-style nationalists who want a referendum tomorrow, I think they are, like you say, potentially shooting themselves in the foot, because if they didn't win it, asking for a third one, it's just become laughable.
Well, you could get one, but you would literally wait at least a generation. You'd have
that nailed down. It wouldn't be, mind you, it was pretty nailed down last time, but there would be much firmer.
Yeah.
It would even be on the ballot paper.
Yeah.
There's not going to be another one of these for 50 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It needs to be a time period that makes people think, well, there's no point devoting any more of my life to this campaign because it really is over. Well, from a unionist perspective, that's what ought to go in. I mean, my guess, what will happen, I think nothing will happen within this parliament, and I don't think, do the SNP want independence? I think they fear it. But someone like Nicola Sturgeon, I mean, I'm not saying that being First Minister is an easy job. I'm sure it's immensely challenging and complex in lots of ways. But on the other hand, you have like got stabilizers on your bike, very definitely. Someone else is making a lot of the really important decisions, and you've got decisions to make, but they're not really the most crucial ones that are made at the UK level. So does the SNP really want to be cut loose to stand on its own 2 feet and face potentially very, very serious challenges? I'm not sure that they do. It's very cozy for them at the moment. They can, they can stir up the crowd, to give the nationalist rhetoric, run the country, which is actually quite a straightforward thing. The money comes in, and you just decide who you're going to give it to. That's the fundamental element of government.
The Helms are useless. They're giving it to Hum's. Giving it to Hum's a useless mum for the Islamic Centre.
You watched that video, did you? That was a great one, wasn't it?
Well, Hum's a useless cousin.
In case anyone hasn't heard about that.
Yeah, well, that's how Richard did a great, which I used in one of my podcasts. I used highlights of it, that you had actually mentioned that Hamza Yusuf's mother got £300,000 of taxpayers' money for to improve CO2 emissions or some of the environmental issues on this one-bedroom flat.
On one house.
One house.
An Islamic charity based it was a big house, one house in Glasgow.
And his cousin got £400,000 from the state to do some sort of party thing or some...
Well, Humza was involved in the Scottish Islamic Foundation. There was this sock puppet charity that... it fell to bits with all sorts of scandals and financial irregularities. But that's how
I can't imagine the SNP. I can't imagine the SNP doing that.
SNP candidate. Same with Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh. The SNP funded her getting and going. Her, what was it, Scottish Asian Women's Trust or whatever it was. Again, a charity that didn't do anything. It didn't spend any money on charitable purposes. But it brought Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh to public prominence with SNP support. Then the next thing you know, SNP candidate. I mean, it's basically corrupt. But the climate change grants, I mean, that's one to Humza Yousaf's mum. That's one of a whole list of totally crazy things that they were giving money away to. I actually tried to follow up and look at more recent ones. But since I made that video, they don't put it on the website quite so clearly anymore.
Interesting.
It's quite much more difficult to see what's going on.
You'll have to do an
Humza
FOI.
Yousaf's mum, though, I would just say that is corruption. To be given the maximum you can get is £150,000, and they were just a few pounds short 2 years in a row to reduce the carbon footprint of a little charity running from one house in Glasgow.
That's incredible.
And never makes the news, never gets brought up in the Parliament.
Well, I mean, you've got an oligopoly of press protecting an oligopoly of political parties or political entities just now. So obviously, and they're shouting at me in the press, but they know that I'm here to disrupt their cosy little game. So this is the good thing about when I'm finished, I'll have promoted new media and smaller parties to more prominence, because even if smaller parties are corrupt, it's better to actually change, as long as the smaller parties are not incompetent. It's better to have a change in a recycling of political ideas to actually see if there are anyone that are actually good. I think that would actually be more beneficial, Richard, would you not? I
mean, proof of the pudding will be the eating. I mean, maybe when I'm First Minister, maybe my mum will be getting £500,000 grant for reducing the carbon footprint of in the garden or something.
I don't know if
it is shocking the way things like that, though. Now, when I made that video, I'm sure, I can't exactly remember, but I'm pretty sure I would have sent that to the media, sent those facts to the media. It was all available on the internet. When that's so obviously a story, isn't it? That is a news story.
But there was also allegations before. Humza Yousaf is alleged to have been held back standing as an MP because he was corrupting the democratic process in the electoral ballots in some way. I don't know quite how he was doing it, and he was held back from actually standing as a candidate for the SNP because he was involved in some vote rigging scandal. I
didn't know about that.
Oh, well, let me just share. So I was trying to find it as well, but no, in fact I couldn't find it last time. But yeah, he was just held back allegedly. This was I'm sure this was in the paper somewhere that there was allegations that he was involved in the vote rigging scandal, and he was held back from actually being able to stand. This before he was elected as an MP because there was involvement in this vote rigging scandal with SNP.
Yeah.
Quite incredible. So the next point I would like to discuss, and this is to me the most important, all of the mainstream political parties, the Lib Lab Con Party, the SNP and the Greens, I don't know, in fact I actually don't know about the Greens, but certainly the Lib Lab Con Party and the SNP, the voters are saying that all these parties are the same. And I don't, and to me they are, but probably the voters don't know why they're the same. And basically what's happening just now is all of them are actually following the globalist agenda. Now, do you believe in the globalist agenda? Or do you think it's a conspiracy?
Do you define it? What do you mean by globalist agenda?
I think there's underlying moves. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I believe that this is, and I'll talk to you about it in a second. There are moves towards a one world government and a one world currency where there's a technocracy of people running the world where they're not necessarily elected and certainly not accountable. A bit like the EU, but in a bigger scale. Yeah.
I think generally, the right of politics, there's the nation state is seen as really valuable. On the left of politics, people tend to be internationalist. They want to move away from nation states and have a sort of brotherhood of all peoples. That sounds great, but effectively it means an empire.
Mm-hmm. That's
so
right.
Instead of having individual states, you've got to have a bigger entity. They used to be called empires, but on the left they tend to call them unions. Mm-hmm. Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, European Union or whatever. So they call it a union. Where am I on that spectrum? The nation state end, because I think that's the biggest entity in which democracy functions. Mm-hmm. Like in the European Union.
I don't necessarily think the globalists, and I would separate internationalists from globalists. I think there's a globalist or an agenda where they actually want a one world government, a one world currency. I think there are people on the left who are internationalists and as you rightly pointed out, want a sort of more congenial brotherhood of man, but the globalists are an entity to themselves, and the globalists want the moves towards a one world government, a one world state.
Yeah, well, when I say like universal brotherhood of man, that's the cover story.
Uh-huh.
But what's underneath it is moving towards an international government, ultimately towards world government. So it's like the S&P, they're never happier than when they've been told what to do by an international body.
It's not elected.
But particularly the UN. Uh-huh. And the UN has a life of its own. I mean, the EU's undemocratic. The UN, it's the same sort of situation. And a lot of the thinking behind it, they do genuinely believe that democracy is dangerous. Uh-huh. If you let the people choose, then you can end up with Hitler. And look where that ended. Look where that ended us up. Uh-huh. So what we need to do is to make sure that the people can't make these mistakes again through democracy. Uh-huh. So, okay, they can have democracy, but we've got to have pretty tight boundaries around the choices that they make. Uh-huh. So the real power needs to be somewhere else. Yeah. So I think that's definitely a move. I mean, that's not conspiracy theory, because a lot of people are very open that that's what they want. They want to move towards a world government. Even if they don't put in those terms, they're always wanting to put more and more power and decision-making to international bodies. And I think a big part of the way that gets presented is through human rights thinking. Mm-hmm. For human rights, everyone should be treated equally. Yes, of course they should. But it also is taken to mean that you can't distinguish or discriminate between someone who's a citizen of your country and someone who's not. Mm. But that's a really fundamental part of the concept of nationhood. Is it a group of people in a special relationship with each other, looking after each other? But the idea of human rights, promoted by the UN, could effectively wipe that out, because it says you're not allowed to treat these people, your compatriots, differently.
Well,
it starts eroding the whole idea of the nation state.
I know you've been vocal against the hate crime bill, which I totally agree with, but that's not about treating people equally. That's treating people differently based on their hierarchy of oppression. Although we've got a female alleged lesbian in charge of the country, so I don't know how they're getting impressed by the patriarchy if we've got a woman in charge. So the
hate speech legislation, they don't really care about hatred. If they bother about hatred, they would just have hate speech legislation, and its definition would be if someone expresses hatred to another person. Absolutely, but there isn't that. It's only certain sorts of hatred that count, and it's only forms of hatred that fit in with the sort of cultural Marxist or like that. So, cultural Marxist interpretation. There's oppressed and oppressor groups, and we've got a list of oppressed groups. So we need to be on their side. We need to give them special protection. So it's that. So it's not actually hatred. It's really what they see as expressions of oppression that they're against. So hatred towards the linesman because he made the wrong decision. He can get called anything you like, the most obscene and offensive things. That can't be a hate crime because he made a bad decision. Whereas if someone makes it, about a protected characteristic, then suddenly the police need to come along. So I think hate crime is a misnomer. It makes it sound like they're against hate, but they're not against hate in general. They're against certain particular types. They're trying to want to protect certain particular types of people who they think are worthy of special treatment by the state.
But I don't know if you looked at it. We covered it on the Guerilla TV channel, and what we covered was the fact that the SNP are now bringing in legislation and going to wholesale import it from the UN. So an undemocratic, non-accountable entity, and throughout the SNP's manifesto, they were always talking about democracy, although they're also wanting to bring in these citizens' assemblies, which, as far as I'm aware, are not democratically elected either. So they're not, and they want to join the undemocratic EU, where 28 unelected commissioners are dictating your legislation. So they seem to. But I mean, Nicola Sturgeon has obviously been going to the Council of Foreign Relations and seemed to get her orders from there how to bring in this postmodernist open door immigration as well.
The UN thing is fascinating. I looked into the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. That was passed into Scots law just a few months ago. If you look at the law they've passed, they've basically said that whatever is in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is the law in Scotland. But it's not just the text of what's in it. It's also however the UN chooses to interpret that in the future. So if the UN goes and tells, I don't know, Ecuador that they have to do such and such a thing, then that becomes the law automatically in Scotland. So it's like saying to the people of Scotland, you can forget it. You're not going to make our laws anymore. Our law is whatever this committee at the United Nations decides.
But they've not been elected though, Richard, and they're not accountable. So why are we importing this? That's because Nicola Sturgeon is a globalist shill, and she's actually now doing it. She's not importing from the UN the Convention on Genocide, I believe either.
So what they want is, the SNP realise that the United Nations is completely on their wavelength. It's a progressive secular left sort of agenda. So the UN does what they want. And the UN, they present it as human rights. So who could be against human rights? That sounds good, doesn't it? So it's a way you can virtue signal, say, look, we're upholding human rights. But what you're actually doing is you're handing the reins over to someone else who's basically going to tell you to do what you wanted to do in any case. But when you do what you want to do in any case, instead of just saying, this is what we want to do, you can now say, the United Nations says we have to do this to uphold human rights. I mean, the great example of that is, abortion. I mean, we're a pro-life party. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child says that a nation has to allow abortion. You have to. And so basically that's saying to the people of Scotland, this is not your decision anymore. I mean, the Conservatives, this is a class, the smacking ban. The Conservatives, virtually all of them, voted against the smacking ban. But then they all vote for the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. which says you have to have a smacking ban. So they vote against the smacking ban, then they vote for another law that says you have to have a smacking ban.
Is the Conservative Party conserving postmodernist Marxism? Is that what they're conserving these days, Richard?
I mean, listen to that story. Just then, do they know what they're doing? Do they understand what they're doing? Have they thought it through? I think the Conservative Party is run by opinion polls. They've got their idea of where the political spectrum is in Scotland, and they've got their idea of which slice they're trying to get. And so that's where they try and put themselves. They don't try and win any arguments. They don't try and persuade the electorate or anything. They just try and go for the section that their pollsters have told them that exists. Yeah, they're very frustrated. I think that they're the most to blame for the mess that we're in. The other parties, I mean, if you're the SNP or Labour, the Lib Dems or the Greens, I mean, your job is to take us off into the wild reaches of excessive progressivism and things are going to fall to bits. I mean, that's their job. The Conservatives' job is to be pulling in the other direction.
That's right. But they're not.
They run along at the back.
But they're not, though, Richard. That's not. They're actually seem to be promoting this progressivism. They seem to be on board. See, I don't see, because I probably look at politics different from the man and woman in the street. I see the Conservative Party and the SNP almost going hand in glove. If you look at policy, rather than, this guy believes a unionist, this is an SNP, a nationalist. If you look at policy, Nicola Sturgeon didn't change the policy that Boris Johnson was on. They were both in step lock there. Nicola Sturgeon isn't complaining about mass immigration, open door immigration, where in the middle of a pandemic we're getting mass immigration from the war-torn country of France, and people are just coming in, not being deported. There is no policy difference between the SNP and the Conservative Party, including their globalist shill ambitions and the moves, even though we've had Brexit, still the moves towards, now we're getting, instead of being governed by the undemocratic EU, we're now getting governed by the undemocratic UN, who nobody's voted for, and yet we're importing laws from another globalist entity where we've not had any vote on. Nobody's decided to win this.
So there's a problem that it's undemocratic. From our point of view, there's also the problem that virtually everything they recommend is wrong. It's contrary to our well, on the issues where the Scottish Family Party takes a stand, on almost all of them, the UN is on the other side of them. And it's interesting, I was talking to someone in Iran a while ago. I don't know if he was a Christian or a Muslim or what, we didn't get onto that. But he was saying, the BBC pumps propaganda into Iran, trying to turn them all progressive, trying to overturn their traditional values, and it's causing chaos. And he said worldwide, there's a conservative majority in the world's population, which you can imagine. Most people have traditional points of view. But there's not many, half Africa. I mean, there's not many, feminists and whatever else that there. I mean, they're pretty conservative, pretty traditional in their views. And it's every battle is that the conservative section of the world's population, so they don't cooperate, whereas united worldwide, it's united in every battle.
Interesting. Quite interesting. I've not thought of it that way. That's quite interesting. What's the family policy? We've in the current arrangement just now, without any more Devo Max, that we have a 3 pence where we could actually reduce taxation at a local income. What's the family party's direction of taxation and also public spending? When people are going and are we going to become more, or are we going to have this large public sector?
This area is that a nation, apart from it in time, so at the moment we're in a time of crisis, or have been in a time of crisis. I would argue it's really over and done with now, we should be back to normal. But we've been through a time of crisis. So during the coronavirus period, that should have been a time where the government says, wow, we're in a real mess here. We need to borrow a substantial amount of money to just keep things afloat. But that's a time of crisis. But the problem is that governments, Scottish and UK governments, for decades, have just assumed that they're in perpetual crisis and they need to borrow like crazy. And basically, it's immoral because you're spending the money of future generations without their consent. And it's just taken for granted that this is a noble and good thing to do. And And the UK and Scottish politics now has reached the stage where the idea of fiscal responsibility barely registers with the electorate. So if you watch some sort of leaders' debate, one person will promise to spend a certain amount, another will promise to spend even more, one will promise to spend even more. And if someone were to say, well, actually, we can't afford that. The economy is going to be in big trouble, but we're going to have real problems, storing up trouble for the future if we keep spending money like this. That voice is just not there anymore. And I think even if it was, I think there's so few people who would take it seriously. I think what can happen with economies is they go through a cycle. You have some sort of collapse where there's really hard times. And then while that generation can still remember that, they're open to the message. You really need to be careful to make sure this doesn't happen again. Once you get to beyond the point where people can remember something like this, then it doesn't register anymore. The warning doesn't register, and they've got to learn the hard way. Now, the 2008 financial crash, okay, it was a big deal, but how many people did that actually affect? Same with coronavirus. How many people has it actually affected? It has affected some people financially very seriously, but the vast majority of people, it hasn't really made that much difference. So I think we're still in this period where people are not willing to heed warnings that it could all go wrong. And so I think the result of that will be that it will all go wrong at some point.
But are you going to see my question, which I actually quite enjoyed your answer there, but my question is, are you going to cut taxes? Let me think. Are you going to cut taxes? Reduce the size of the public sector, which I'm not talking about nurses and doctors and all that. I'm not talking about that side, but there is waste there. Our public sector is massive in Scotland, and increase the number of entrepreneurs. Is that going to be something that the family? Where are we? Or are we going to continue with this, or like Nicola Sturgeon wants to sort of continually raise taxation just now, which is making us uneconomical?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how are we going to balance the books, basically? Well, spend less. Like I say, there's a lot of things to cut. I will just read a section from our policies. So these are basically organisations that we would defund. Young Scots, Children and Young People's Commission, Equality Network, Scottish Trans Alliance, Creative Scotland, Scottish Human Rights Commission, Equality Human Rights Commission Scotland, Amnesty International, White Ribbon, Engender Crew, Alcohol Focus Scotland, Stonewall, Friends of the Earth, National Parent Forum of Scotland, LGBTI Health and Wellbeing, LGBTI Youth Scotland, Obesity Action Scotland, Interfaith Scotland, One Scotland, SCORE Scotland, Coalition for Racial Equality and Rights, Culture Republic, Scottish Alliance of Regional Equality Council, CEMVO, BMIS, Steve Retson Project, Children in Scotland, Amina, Muslims Women's Resource Centre, Fast Forward, Starcasters, Together, Scottish Alliance of Children's Rights and the Scottish Book Trust. So that would be a decent starter. Because in Scotland, if you take any three words there, like network, Scottish, youth, LGBT, race, whatever, just put them in any random order, search for it on the internet, and it probably exists. There is some organisation out there getting government funding. So we will scrap a whole load of this. Now, in the grand scheme of the Scottish budget, that's not going to make a huge dent in it, but it would be a good place to start. I mean, beyond that, what would we do? Would taxes go up or would spending go down? I would say when you've eliminated all of the waste, then if we're still not balancing the books, then taxes would have to creep up.
See, the thing that the politicians keep saying, it's either taxation or spending. But the reality is, if the focus was on growth, which Nicola Sturgeon has deliberately went away and she's been waffling on about social issues and whatever dopey, dreamt up thing that she can imagine, rather than actually increasing GDP. Now, she's on TED Talks. Have you seen her speaking in TED Talks?
Yeah,
did you see her with it?
Yeah.
And she's waffling on about social conditions and all that. And she says, and we're not really wanting to increase the GDP. Maybe from Nicola Sturgeon's point of view, but having all these, so basically we're paying for a lot of people who are getting probably high income jobs in the public sector, cosy parachute things, and we're negating the private sector. And if we've got a lot of talented people in Scotland, if these people were coming out of the public sector into the private sector, A, they'll find out how hard it is. B, there should be more money for stage 1 and stage 2 funding. But if you grow the economy, then you're going to get higher tax receipts, which is then gives you more greater flexibility. But I would suggest that you want to reduce the public sector and lower taxation. Thereby, you'll increase the growth rate, increase the private sector, increase the ability for Scotland to compete internationally, reduce poverty, and you're not going to have the requirement for all these daft public sector bodies that are doing nothing but increasing growth, reducing growth.
I would agree. I think the problem with Nicola Sturgeon's thing that, we're not going to aim to increase GDP. The thing is, when a country does aim to increase GDP and really does everything it can, quite often it doesn't manage it. It just keeps it flatlining. So they can just maintain their public services as they are. As soon as you say, well, we're not going to bother, we're not going to prioritize that anymore, well, it's quite likely it's going to go down. It's not something that you can say, oh, we're going to ignore it, so it'll just stay level. It's hard work. Keeping a wealthy country wealthy. It needs a lot of focus, it needs a lot of good decisions to keep it that way. So I think Nicola Sturgeon reflects her position of complacency within the United Kingdom, that it's not actually her responsibility to maintain the level of wealth and the level of public spending, because that's sort of someone else is looking after that. So she doesn't need to worry too much. If Scotland became independent, I think she'd change her tune pretty quickly. They would be terrified about economic decline. Scotland became independent, and they would be really looking quite hard at how they were going to
increase the growth rate.
But the problem is that they've created generations of voters in Scotland who are just totally unfamiliar with the arguments related to that. You've got generations where the substantial majority of the electorate are in the mindset of just the more money the government gives away to people and the more it spends on things, the better. That makes it a better government. So if the SNP suddenly found itself with an independent Scotland on its hands, it would have a hard sell because of the generations it itself has educated into this viewpoint.
Well, Georgie Porgy Galloway, my friend Georgie, said he had a great thing. He said, I'm going to open the books. If I get elected in Scotland, I'm going to open the books, which I thought is actually correct. What is actually required is not just the opening of the books, but I would suggest some forensic accountants to find out where the waste is, where the actual money is going, actual public sector forensic accountants, to find out where the money is going and where the actual waste is in the actual public sector, which can be caught.
I mean, Humza Yousaf's mum's thing. I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg.
Tip of the iceberg,
That's the sort of trivial little story that we happen to have latched onto because it's interesting. But that's just part of a huge array of similar things happening. So the scale of waste is incredible. Like Education Scotland is under fire at the moment. I can't remember how many staff they've got. It's hundreds in any case, and they do pretty well nothing that's useful. They have 6 people employed trying to close the gender gap in subject choice. So they're trying to get more girls to do physics and more boys to do, I don't know, English literature or something. 6 full-time staff working on that so-called problem. I mean, again, that's just a little illustration, but the amount of that multiplied by 1,000 or more across the nation. It's not just at government level, it's at council level as well. And there could be huge amounts of money saved. Well, even within like core services like the NHS, the police, etc. Again, it's not like 10% of their budget or whatever, but there's a not insignificant sum that's spent on the political policing or the equality and diversity stuff. Same with the NHS as well. Substantial amount of money is wasted due to politicization.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite incredible. Let me show you something as well, Richard. Let me just share my screen again and show you this as well. When I was younger, I discovered that I had dyslexia. And but I actually changed the Scottish education system, I went through Karen Gillan, who was a Labour MP, and was taken in, and this was 2002, and between 2002 and 2008. Just give me a second, I'll get this up. Oh, there we are. So,
my name is Wallace Jaff.
This young gentleman was helped by potentially what I did, but potentially what Dyslexia Scotland did as well. I got through Karen Gillan. I went and initially brought the 3 different dyslexia bodies in to speak to the MSPs. Eventually, somebody else formed an actual group within the Scottish Parliament for dyslexia. Margaret Mitchell, who was the Conservative MSP, was actually chairing it, and. They said that dyslexia, now some people have got multiple learning difficulties, and but for dyslexia they said that up to 10% of the population had dyslexia. But just now they've only identified, so that would equate to something like 73,000 children in the Scottish education system with specific learning difficulties, only with the dyslexic one, not for having dyslexia and other ones. And they still haven't, the SNP have actually improved it, so I think credit for credit's due. They didn't even have official figures back in 2002, and but they still haven't brought in compulsory identification for specific for children with specific learning difficulties, and this has had having an ongoing massive effect on Scottish pupil attainment, which has also been affected by the SNP's incompetence. As you're a teacher, you're a former teacher, aren't you, Richard? So you probably know about the incompetence in this. So let me show you this. We're both drunk here, by the way, just so you get a point of reference, and hopefully you find this interesting. And this young man's just, I'm sure you'll be impressed. You're a secondary teacher?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, well, you'll be impressed with what this young man's got.
Wallace. Aye. What is he? He's a whore! Yes, I'm that too.
Hey, Wallace.
I have
gentleman and a scholar.
I have four advanced hires, and
what age are you?
I'm 19.
Right, go on.
I have physics, mathematics, applied orbital mechanics, and computing.
What did you get the 7 hires in?
I got 4 A's.
What did you get them in? What did you get the subjects for your?
Physics, computing, maths, chemistry, biology, English, and geography.
Now, I just would like to point out, Richard, that because people are not going to know listening to this, I get 3 C hires when I was doing my hires, but because I hadn't been identified with my dyslexia at this point, but 4 advanced hires and 7 hires, 4 A hires, is Oxbridge levels of intellect. Would you agree?
Yes, yep.
I mean, I would say it was exceptional, this young fella.
How did you, what age were you when you were identified with dyslexia?
Oh, fucking like 12.
So you were late getting identified?
Yeah.
And did that make a massive difference to your, how did you get identified?
Well, they pretty much decided I couldn't spell. So they just diagnosed me I really couldn't spell, seriously. So they just decided I couldn't, they just got a psychologist to diagnose me. Funny enough, I'm also diagnosed with Tourette's.
Alright, okay.
But most people can't notice that, so that's alright.
You don't swear.
Exactly.
Shit.
I have really good self-esteem, don't you worry.
That's great.
So I also like to, I went and spoke to Jack McConnell, and Jack McConnell, the parents couldn't go and ask for their children to be assessed for specific learning difficulties such as dyslexia, and Jack McConnell brought in the assessment of children for dyslexia. So that's why I'm asking them specific questions, because this was after I spoke to Jack McConnell and I put a petition in to have all children assessed for specific learning difficulties. So, but I mean, quite an exceptional young man, and it just shows you what happens when a child is accurately identified. How unbelievably well this young fella's done.
So, have you got a bad memory, a personal organisation that usually is affected with dyslexia?
No.
So you don't have that?
No. I just deal with it myself.
I'm not quite sure what he was meaning there. I just deal with it myself. I don't know if he's got that, but usually conditions such as bad memory, personal organisations affect as well.
And are you sure you're dyslexic rather than just having that every day?
I've been diagnosed with dyslexia. Like, I have papers and stuff.
Yeah. And how did you get diagnosed? Who diagnosed you?
The school. The school has a...
Did your mum and dad ask to get diagnosed?
No, the school asked my mum and dad to get diagnosed because I was so bad at spelling. They pretty much said...
Has that affected you? I mean, obviously you're very intelligent, but did that have a... Before you were diagnosed, did that have a profound effect on you?
It definitely had a profound effect before I was diagnosed. But these days it doesn't matter because mostly I do maths and physics and shit.
Right, so you do numbers and that was very good with numbers.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I just focus on numbers from now on. Is that enough?
Yeah, but I'm just going to say that in 2002, I got the 3 different dyslexia bodies to go and speak to the MSPs with Karen Gillan. Karen Gillan, who was a Labour MP for Clydesdale, took the 3 different dyslexia bodies and actually spoke to all the MPs. And then in 2008, when should you be in 2008? 8. Right, so that's prior to you getting actually diagnosed. I actually got I put a petition in to have all children assessed for specific learning difficulties, and I also spoke to Jack McConnell, who brought in the Disability Students Allowance for master's graduates.
DSA?
I think he was getting excited that I'd done this for the undergraduates. The undergraduate thing was already in place for this for some strange reason. But for postgraduates, because obviously they hadn't been identifying children with specific learning difficulties, including dyslexia, before, it wasn't there for postgraduates. So Jack McConnell did bring it in for postgraduates. But I think he was getting excited that I did it for undergraduates, which I didn't.
Yeah, so
I appreciate that.
For masters graduates, postgraduates, and Jack McConnell also he allowed parents to have their children assessed as well, which that's why I was asking you, was it the school or was it your parents who got assessed? And you said it was your parents in the school, which is good. That's progress.
I'm glad you did. I really appreciate it.
That's right, I'm glad. There's now 17,000 rather than 7,000. 7,000 in 2002, 17,000 now, but there's many more dyslexics.
There's so many out there that haven't been assessed.
Yeah, that's right.
And autism as well.
Yeah,
like
I have ADD, so...
My big brother's been assessed with severe autism. So yeah, it's good.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really happy. 4 advanced hires, 7 hires, 4 A hires,
a degree,
and you're now doing a degree.
I'm aiming for a PhD, so
Which I think you'll get.
What's your name?
Wallace Jaffrey.
Wallace, a pleasure.
So I've not met young Wallace before or since. Oh, I met him once after, but so I actually had written in the Scotsman, had articles published in the Scotsman, although these links, I don't know, for some reason are not there, and obviously to the Parliament's website as well, about what I'd done with having the petition in. But obviously you being a teacher, I was just wondering what your thoughts on all this and what the family party's thoughts are on some of the most vulnerable children that they've got learning difficulties going through our public education and private education system.
Right, now there's a big area. Right, so special needs in education. Where do we start that? I'll tell you my little story. For a start, it's funny, I didn't tell this story very often. I was actually talking to someone else about it just the other day. When I was at primary school, I don't know, maybe about age 10, the teacher called my mum in and said they wanted to send me to a special school because they thought I was whatever, educationally subnormal, couldn't cope in the mainstream school. But I think my mum tried to persuade them that I could maybe carry on. And then and almost immediately, for the next year onwards, it did, pretty well. I think it's just a bit bizarre. I think it was just based on the fact that my writing wasn't very good. My spelling wasn't great. I think I'm very mildly dyslexic. I maybe it was a bit more so when I was younger. I mean, even now, there's some things I think I'm not quite sure how to spell that, and I probably should be able to. But it's very, very mild. So I had a little bit of that. Now, when I was teaching, obviously, this was all the thing. There was a lot of assessments for these things. I mean, dyslexia is a cluster of, maybe symptoms is not the right word, but it's a cluster of
issues,
issues that people face. They just tend to go together. And then that's got the label dyslexia put on it. I think the ideal would be a system whereby pupils are monitored and their relative strengths and weaknesses are assessed. So you don't particularly need to put a label on anyone. You don't particularly need to have a diagnosis of something. But if schools are aware of where different people have got different issues, and then things are geared to help, then that's fine. I always felt, if say a boy, it was boys' school where I taught, let's say a boy had dyslexia, they'd have a special profile, and it would tell you the special things you had to do to help that boy. And to be honest, I always used to find it wasn't particularly helpful. I mean, the boy's in front of me, I can see what he's doing, I'm talking to him, I can see where the issues are, I can help him with it. But I think where the real difference was made was with the learning support specialists who would spend time with them one-to-one and focus on these particular things. And I think that made a massive difference. So if they had the right interventions, the right extra support at an earlier stage, like late primary into early secondary, generally things were in place, and then they were
improvements.
They were going their merry way and do really well.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you in the fact of not naming it, because I think that's what they've done before and it wasn't successful. My mum's a primary teacher as well, so it's not the fact that we've not got an education in the family. And by not naming it and not actually being able to address it, then you're not able.
But they didn't measure it before then.
Yeah,
it wasn't that they were measuring all these things and assessing them.
No, they just weren't doing it.
They weren't assessing them. So if you imagine you've got a pupil who it shows, there's a bit of an issue with reading, spelling, reading comprehension or whatever, and you've got that specific thing, then you might have someone else who's just got one of those issues, but it doesn't justify the label dyslexic. But maybe they've got another issue instead. So maybe the one with the dyslexic, people are like, all right, I know what to do with dyslexics, they need that. Maybe the other one, because it didn't quite meet the criteria. Having labels is useful in one way, but in other ways, it's not. The other thing I would say with these like learning support profiles used to get is sometimes they would go too far. And you'd have a boy say, who's struggling. So he'd be sent to see the educational psychologist. Then I, as a classroom teacher, would get like a letter from the educational psychologist saying, can you please fill the form in about this boy? So I'd fill it in. It'd be things like, does he remember his books? Does he concentrate well or whatever? Does he do his homework? And so if I said, no, he doesn't bring his books, he doesn't concentrate well, doesn't do his homework, then you get their profile produced that says, right, this pupil has got organizational problems. They find it hard to bring their books. They find it hard to concentrate. And I can't remember the other thing I said. Anyway, the other one. And then what happens then, when it gets to report time, if I write on that boy's report, he doesn't bring his books, he needs to try and bring his books, then you get told off for that. You say, you can't say that, because that's in his learning support profile. Or if I were to say to the boy, oh, come on, you've forgotten your books again. Oh, come on, you need to really get organized, get a system. Go on, go and get them. Then it would be seen as, oh, you can't do that, because it's on his learning support profile. So it's like petrifying the situation. It's saying that these are weaknesses, these are areas of weakness, but you can't touch them. You've just got to. I
don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think you're only going to improve on the areas of weakness if you actually. But what you should be doing is giving them coping mechanisms. For example, for somebody who has got a bad memory, memorisational jogs, such as on your phone, to actually put down reminders when you go home, when you do this, and fill out reminders on a daily basis. And once you get into a routine of doing that, now that's probably not done, but that would be better for them if they've got that difficulty. You can get dictating machines where you can actually dictate things rather than having to type them out. So computerise the classroom. So there's various types of coping mechanisms rather than penalising the teacher who may do that. You have to understand how to actually change the mindset of the child, or not the mindset, but change the from a strength to a weakness, from a weakness to a strength, and actually be able to get the child to put in reminders on a phone, and that will help him jog his memory and do things like that.
That's where the specific support was really valuable. You've got someone sitting down with that one boy and saying, right, these are the issues. What are we going to do about this? Let's try and come up with some strategies. So rather than every separate teacher trying to just squeeze in a couple of minutes to say, right, what plan can we make? If you've got someone dedicated to that role, saying, right, you keep forgetting to do your homework, right, so get your phone or get your iPad or whatever, let's see if we can make a system, let's get some alerts or whatever, then that's really useful. And in terms of classroom learning, I say you can see how someone's doing, you can see their work. So you're constantly aware of how that's going. If someone's not getting it for whatever reason, you can see, and you can go and explain this again. You can do what's necessary. But then what the support can do is the step back a bit and try and look at broader strategies to put in place. And I find that could be really effective. So I think that this idea of assessing is obviously a good thing to do. More information is obviously useful. Then if that information is used to help people overcome issues and to move forward, then that's good. If it becomes like an excuse, you can't tell me I have to do better at this because it's on my learning support profile. So you're being a bit nasty if you're telling me I have to do better. Then if it goes into that, then it's counterproductive. I think in Scottish education at the moment, there's quite a pull towards being sort of super understanding, even indulgent. The main thing is, as long as you're happy, let's not worry about too much about getting better and making progress. As long as you're happy and you're not feeling stressed or whatever, or under pressure, then that's okay. But I think everyone, whatever stage they're at, whatever level they're at, everyone needs a bit of pressure, a bit of a push to try and reach to improve. And I've seen boys who are quite severe learning difficulties, dyslexia, whatever, at earlier stages. With the right support, as I say, give them a few years, and there's no support necessary anymore, and they do really, really well. They still might, spell something in an odd way here, there, every now and again, whatever, but they could do really well.
But young Wallace Jaffrey there doing fantastically well. I mean, that you'll know, but people from the international audience are not going to know how good that is. 7 hires and 4 A hires is exceptional. Never mind the 4 advanced in aeronautics or whatever the hell it was. So that was an exceptional young man.
Just one other side on this. I had a class once in one of the schools I taught in. There were 14 people in the class. 13 of them had a special profile. So I've got 13 special instructions about the way that particular pupil had to be dealt with. And this was a class, I didn't see them very often. It was only like once or twice a week or whatever. I mean, teachers' brains are only so big.
Would it not be better having children with similar academic profiles in a class with one teacher who understands how to teach these children with the similar condition?
Well, what it amounted to, it's basically they were all quite similar. And you could have a whole class approach that worked. But if someone came in and watched my lesson with those 13 profiles in front, they'd say, oh, you broke the rule for him, or you broke the rule, or he didn't do what he needed. So if someone's of a mind to, it's very easy to criticize and claim that you're not really doing the job. But on the other hand, as I say, it's more fluid than that in the classroom. You pick up on if you're aware of where everyone is and how they're doing, you can tailor things to meet their needs. I think I mean, sometimes with these profiles, I can confess this now. You never confess this while you're teaching. I mean, sometimes you might even forget that we've got a profile for a few weeks. And then you might look at it after and think, oh, I've completely forgotten about that. And what it says, you sometimes think, oh, yeah, that's right, actually. I can see he does struggle a bit with that. Yeah, I do find myself helping him out a bit. But other times you look at it and think, what's that on about? He doesn't have those problems at all. He's doing absolutely fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the bits of paper for the classroom teacher are maybe not as valuable as people think, but the extra support they get, specialist support outside class, I think is very valuable.
So let's let's move on to the Green Party. So the Green Party and the SNP were the only two parties to increase the number of seats. So they're only the SNP and the the Greens actually increased by more than anybody else. Uh-huh. So let me, I don't know. The Greens, if Scotland or the UK, let's say the UK as a whole, had no CO2 emissions whatsoever, under the Green Party's environmental whatever, would that mean that the CO2, there was going to be no CO2 problem in the world?
I think the Greens would find another one. They'd find a new problem. This is what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that climate change and CO2 emissions, I'm not saying that they're disconnected. It's just that through my life, there's always been the big environmental catastrophe looming. And it seems, when I was at school, the big panic was we're going to run out of oil. Uh-huh. There was a new subject called environmental studies that was introduced when I was at high school. And remember, the big theme was in geography as well. We're going to run out of oil. This is when it's going to happen. And we're not going to be able to drive around anymore. Society is going to fall to bits. We really need to panic about this. What can we do about it? And then they were just basically completely wrong. Yeah, so I think if CO2 emissions suddenly disappeared completely, I think they would find another environmental course. I mean, they've got to. If you're the Green Party, the ideal issue is telling people, look, we're all doomed if you don't do exactly what our policies say. I mean, it really is the perfect political message, isn't it? I mean, it overwhelms everything else. So, I'm sure they'd find something else. And there's always going to be things to choose from.
Such as?
The world's physical makeup. And then space as well. Look at what's going on in space. I mean, there are always going to be things that people will project into the future and predict that things are going to go wrong one way or another. So that's not to say expressing any view about the truth or otherwise of anthropomorphic global warming, but I'm just saying I think that's the way the Green Party would respond.
But
what's this? World CO2.
So the UK sort of halved its CO2 emissions and is now obviously probably outside the top 10 CO2 emitters. So if UK and Scotland got to zero emissions, it wouldn't be a drop in the ocean of, and this is 2017, so this is 4 years old, there wouldn't be a drop in the ocean of China, who's the largest CO2 emitters, then followed by the US, followed by India, followed by Russia. So all of these are, so even if the UK got to zero CO2, which I'm not saying don't strive for, it's not, and if CO2 is causing global warming, then it wouldn't make a difference, would it?
No, yeah, the thing I was thinking about the environmental campaigners and the Green Party, etc., well, all the parties, is if they really believe these projections of doom about the future, then I think we would hear more about how we're going to cope with this. Because basically, the situation is not going to change. It doesn't matter what the Scottish government does. It's going to make, like you say, it's going to make virtually zero difference to the big picture. So if they really believe these predictions, there will be more talk about, right, this is what we need to do. We need to be building sea walls here and here. We need to be building water, desalination plants or whatever. And there would be serious planning about that going on. But as far as I can see, there isn't. So it just makes me wonder, how confident are they really about these things? It's like in America, it's like the universal acceptance of sea level rise. If you look at land prices are places that are going to be underwater if there's significant sea level rise. They're unaffected, and including government departments or whatever invested in them. I don't know, how confident are they really in it? I'm not sure.
Well, the great intellectual Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is said that we've got 10 years, and she looked obviously coming for work as a bartender to know what she was talking about, but she looked very sincere, very sincere about it.
10 years is really handy, isn't it? Because if it was
what happens in year 11 if it doesn't happen? That's what I want to know.
See, if you've got 3 years, then that's not going to affect the next election, is it?
No.
So we're too late, really. But 10 years means this next election coming, you really have to vote Green or for whoever's going to do the most. It's really crucial. So in terms of motivating the electorate, if you like, 10 years is pretty well perfect. If you said we've got 10 months, then the problem is after 10 months, you've blown it and you've lost your thing. But 10 years is just about right. The start of this 10 years, it seems to move on a year every year. I mean, I haven't heard anyone say we've got 9 years or 8 years, but I'm sure they've been saying we've got 10 years for at least 2 years. It seems to be a move in 10 years. And it just seems a bit convenient that it does just seem to be the optimum time period to motivate an electorate. And the other reason for this, as I say, I'm not a total skeptic. These are my reservations, not my knockdown arguments against it. The other thing is, when I look at other areas of university life where there's the potential for it to be politicized, it happens big time, and they completely lose perspective and lose the plot. That's what seems to happen in university departments as soon as there's the opportunity for political bias. And so are we supposed to believe that climate science is the one area that's completely immune from this? I mean, what can happen in a scientific discipline is you end up with a culture where you either agree with the mainstream theories, or if you don't agree with them, then you haven't got a job. You can't become a climate professor of climatology or whatever. So once you've had that situation for a couple of decades, then that's right, you do have an overwhelming consensus. It's not because there's not other points of view. It's just that
does there have to be a political?
You don't let them in your club.
Does there have to be a political intervention in our universities to rebalance the universities just now? Is there a political problem in our universities and the recruitment of new lecturers that you're being recruited if you believe in X, Y, and Z rather than actually be any free thinker? And thereby indoctrinating down the line. I would draw your attention as well to postmodernist ISO architecture. We've got a big thing that looks like a whippy turd at the end of Princes Street, and something that's meant to be a world-renowned heritage site, and this thing looks like a big whippy turd in the middle of it.
I think that building, for such an important building, it's such a prominent position, is there not a place for genuine engagement with the people of Edinburgh? Not just Edinburgh, this is the capital city, the people of Scotland. Because I really don't think that would have passed muster if that was put to one of these citizens' assemblies. Just pick 100 random people and see what they think of it. I would say I don't particularly like it. I'm not averse to modern architecture, so it might grow on me, but it just looks a bit out of proportion and a bit odd. Not too keen. No,
but what I'm saying is, I think the postmodernist Marxism has infiltrated the universities, and there are lectures that are such as art, and like the art schools becoming postmodernist, the architecture's becoming postmodernist, Nicola Sturgeon's bad haircuts becoming postmodernist. We're getting a lot of unattractive things that are definitely can be laid back to the universities. And do we need a change in personnel in the universities and a political change in it?
I think with architecture, what you get is people whose philosophy is to reject traditional Western culture. So what's pretty universally acknowledged as beautiful buildings, people go on holiday to see them and take photographs of them. That's associated with traditional Western culture, so that must be bad. So in order to express our rejection of that and our progression past it, we need to build things that are completely at odds with it. So then our philosophy is behind it, and it's often pretty disastrous. In terms of university staff bias, that's a tricky one. Get a university, you want to recruit the best academics, and you also want them to be able to speak freely about their views. But university is not like primary school. They should be able to talk about all sorts of issues. But the problem is, in like your maths, science, engineering departments, you might get a reasonable balance of people with liberal and conservative points of view. But if you're a maths lecturer, you don't really have much chance to talk about that. It doesn't really come into your subject. So where there is more diversity of thought, it doesn't count for anything. But then when you get over into politics, geography, social science, I mean, you name it, I mean, right to the far end, gender studies or whatever, then they're totally dominated by people of a sort of left progressive mindset. So what's the way to solve that? I think one thing is to absolutely insist on freedom of speech on campus, so that where there are people with other views, they can express them. I don't know if you followed the story with Dr. Thin at Edinburgh University. He was suspended and investigated for saying a trans man isn't a woman. They shouldn't be renaming David Hume Tower. He thought an anti-racism event where white people weren't allowed to speak wasn't the best way forward.
I think he's correct. I think he's correct in all of that. I was absolutely gobsmacked by all of that.
So he was suspended. He's been reinstated now, but he shouldn't have been put through that. So that sort of thing needs to stop. Then the other thing, even if you've got, say, your social studies department at your university, it's stuff full of hardline progressives. Okay. But say they have to make an effort to bring in people with a different perspective and to debate with them and to invite the students, well, not even invite them, to say this is part of your course, is to hear someone with a different perspective. So you might end up with someone, an academic with very conservative views. They might be quite a busy person because they're really in demand, because all the other universities are thinking, we really need to get someone with those views to come and give a lecture or just come and speak to our pupils just to balance things up a bit. And I think that's probably the best you do. I think if you start trying to have quotas for political viewpoints in universities, I mean, I can see a case for it, but it's quite difficult to implement. I'm not sure that's really the way we'd want to go. But insisting, if university authorities could look at the spectrum of opinion and say, right, this part of the spectrum has not been represented, not being communicated to your students, what are you going to do about it? And I think that would be a good question. And they have to do something about it. I think that would be the way forward.
Let's talk a wee bit. We're coming to a close shortly enough. So let's talk a wee bit about, go back to this. I'm not sharing this with you. Just give me a second. It's not thinking that. There we go. So we'll go back to this, Richard, what we started with at the beginning. So how is the Scottish Family Party doing very well? As I said, the largest amount of first past votes for only 7 candidates. I mean, it's incredible to think if you had candidates in every seat, and whether or not that would have raised your actual regional vote list representation as well, if it was in every seat. Yeah. But I mean, if you look there, I think Scottish Libertarian Party are the second highest voted for. I think they had more candidates actually than you. And then the new Freedom Alliance, who are a very interesting party, get even more regional votes. I mean, that's quite incredible there. But I mean, over nearly 6,000 votes. So for the Scottish Libertarian Party, so they're massively increased. But how, from a political strategy point of view, how are you going to get from under 0.6% up to 8%? How, or even just to take it up to fighting with the Liberals? What's the strategy going to be to get from 16,000 votes into your hundreds of thousands of votes?
Well, there's no magic bullet. So the strategy is to do everything we can to increase awareness of the party and then to increase understanding of the party. That's a major part. That in the Scottish population, there is a big enough section of the votes by quite a margin for the Scottish Family Party to get people elected. So our job is to persuade those people who already agree with us to vote for us. So the thing we've got to sell there is we've got to say to them, these issues where you agree with us, they're so important that they're worth choosing your vote on the basis of them. So instead of choosing your vote on nationalism, unionism, or whatever, choosing them on, pro-life, pro-family, because these things are more important. So that's what we've got to sell. I think with any sort of organization, you hear this in advertising speak quite a lot, people have to hear of something a few times before they actually consider it. You don't just see something, an advert on Facebook, and then that's it. You see it from a few directions, then you start thinking, what's this? This is maybe something worth looking into. And I think that's the case with us. So we're in the process of communicating with people again and again and again. They're becoming more familiar with us. Then it spreads from person to person, grassroots contact as well. So we've got to keep doing that. So we'll do everything we can with social media, local meetings, trying to get in mainstream media, trying to do stunts and events, whatever we can do to try and get attention to us. So that's one side. And the other side is to actually persuade new people that what we're saying makes sense as well. So people who hitherto wouldn't have shared our opinions, but having listened to us, they come round to our way of thinking. So we need a bit of that as well. Like all the small parties, the challenge is communication. Mm-hmm. We all like to think that if we were given, 10-minute slot in the middle of the 6 o'clock news every night, between now and the next election, then we'd be home and dry. Now, if every small party had that, maybe we wouldn't. But if just the Scottish Family Party did, then I think we probably would.
Would you? No, you go on.
I was just going to say, no magic bullet. So keeping doing what we're doing that works. I mean, it is building the party up. We always want things to go more quickly, but on the other hand, there's always encouraging signs as well. The other challenge we've got now is everyone's interested in politics at election time. But now is the time when interest in politics can trough a little bit for the next couple of years with no major elections. So our challenge is to keep people's interest and to still communicate with people, even though the politics might have gone down their agenda a little bit.
Will the Family Party be prepared to, if I can organise it both online and actual sit-down debates with other smaller parties who are not getting a fair crack at the whip? Would you guys be interested?
We actually organised a small party question time.
Oh, great.
It must be a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So we had Libertarians for Britain.
Oh, right, okay. Anne-Marie Waters.
Yeah. And there was going to be another party, but I think they dropped out. So it ended up just the three of us. But yeah, I think the small parties can really do each other a favour there by putting on joint events.
Yeah, because you're going to get ignored predominantly. You're going to get ignored predominantly from the mainstream media, especially up to the run-ins. So I think an alternative leaders' question time would go down quite well.
The other thing someone like you could do is don't just go for the small parties. Invite the local MSP or MP. If they're a big name, they might not do it. If they're not, especially if they're in your constituency, generally they're quite pleased with a bit of attention and they're willing to pitch up for this sort of thing.
Okay.
So I think if you invited an MSP or two, as well, from the parties in the Scottish Parliament, obviously, then there's a fair chance they would come along. And if you put those in with a couple of people from the small parties, then I think you get like 10 times better debate than you would on the BBC political programme.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it would certainly open up the political discourse to new ideas. And maybe the Scottish electorate would be as bored with the choice that they're actually getting as they seem to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you see, the small parties, it's quite hard for us to do it. If we got in touch with, say, the SNP and said, right, we'd like to have someone to do a debate with, they would just say no. Because basically you're just going to use our representative to show, to publicise your own party. So why should we help you? So they'd say no. But if you do it as a neutral, I'm a constituent and I just want to do this so people can hear you, then totally different kettle of fish.
Oh, interesting.
But
I think I don't think it can be left to the next Westminster. I think if you're going to increase your vote share, you have to build it up over the next 4 years and do regular things. So we'll try and get you on in a leadership like we've just done just now, but we'll do a sort of 40-minute question time with 4 leaders, and we'll do an alternative question time so that we can actually get you. Now that we can do it, we can get you out on the internet, and I'll chaperone it, and we'll get the other people to actually speak on it.
Yeah, you'll get some more other people as well. The deputy leader, chairman, deputy chairman, there are plenty of other people as well who would come on.
Yeah. Who was the girl? Quite posh accent. The girl from African origin that was up at the bridge. She spoke very well.
Taconi.
She spoke very well as well.
And it's interesting, that video. I mean, Taconi's a member of the party, and my wife filmed it on my phone.
Wow!
And lots of people were saying, "Oh, where does your money come from? Getting these professional video crews and an actress."
She's fantastic. I thought she was absolutely great. I thought she was absolutely awesome. So, what's the strategy for the next 4 years? How is it going to be built on them?
Well, for next year's council elections. So our chairman is running the council election campaign. So we're just at the early stages. A few people have come forward, interested in standing. So we'll make as much as we can of that. Through the coming year, I think assisted suicide is going to come back to the Scottish Parliament quite soon. Mm-hmm. So that will be a big campaigning issue for us. We'll make as much as we can the Westminster elections. But they're 4 years away. That's quite a way away.
Yeah.
We're having our second in-person conference in November the 13th.
Have you got any councillors yet?
No, we haven't stood in any council elections. So we're really going to give that a go. I think if you've got the right person with the right local contacts and they invest in it, 4-member wards, you remember the chance. The turnout is so pitiful. You never know. So we're going to give that a really good go. We'll see what happens. So we've got a conference in November. That will be quite good. We had our first conference 2019, 100 of us were there, crammed into this other room, and a real buzz about it. It was really good. So we should be at least twice as big this time. Because the party's grown a lot, so that's something to look forward to. We're always trying to strike a balance between, to get in the mainstream media, you generally have to pull some sort of stunt. Have you seen our outdoor projector that we use?
No.
So I put messages on the side of the Parliament and things.
All right.
So we do that sort of thing, and that gets us in the mainstream media every now and again. But on the other hand, we don't want to be seen as the party that's like, always up to silly fun and games, not really a serious party. So we're going to put lots of sort of serious heavyweight content out as well. Social media will continue to grow overall. Hopefully, I say our leadership team is expanding. We've got people coming forward offering to do all sorts of things. And having local meetings again, that will be a huge bonus. We've really missed that. Because we've had meetings all over Scotland, really, probably about 15 different locations. And the party is much bigger than it was before lockdown came along. So I'm really looking forward to getting back into that. I think we'll have some good local meetings. How
do people join or get to know about you? Where are the information? How do they pay money to your established party?
You can join via the website.
Let me just get this up. So
where you can join, or you can become a regular donor, or you can give a one-off donation. You can also sign up for the newsletter. So if you want to know about local events, they tend to be in the newsletter. We don't always put them on social media. Part of the reason is we always get cancelled. So if I were to put on social media, we're having a meeting in the Royal Hotel in Perth Tuesday night, someone would phone up the Royal Hotel in Perth and say, you've got these nasty people using your hotel, I'm never going to come again. And then we get cancelled. It's really annoying. Mm-hmm. So we tend to keep our venues secret until the last minute.
I think that's a disgrace. I think that's a disgrace to democracy. And I think, and I don't think it's just you that actually happens to. So I mean, it's. I know that other parties are, especially now we know that you're a centre-left party, but they seem to want to cancel anybody that's going to infringe upon the globalist agenda, which I would suggest that all 3 to 4 parties are heavily invested in.
But they're just weak. A lot of the people who run these organisations are weak. A bit of a complaint, and they just complain. They always assume that they've got nothing to fear from us. But sometimes we've struck back. We've seen what we can do in terms of giving them a bit of bad publicity if they cancel on us. But last year for our conference, we didn't publicise the venue. Right. We were so worried that if we got cancelled for our conference, that would have been a major problem. So the plan was to email everyone on the morning of the conference, everyone who'd bought a ticket, to tell them where it was.
Yeah, that's a disgrace. That's a disgrace in a democratic society.
And Eventbrite crashed, so we couldn't get everyone's email address.
Oh my God!
Oh dear, it was anyway. Most people, pretty well everyone got there in the end. But it does. All these little things add up, and it's all friction. It all makes it more difficult to go about what you want to do.
How do you actually join? I can't see. Am I being? Can you see this? Where do you join?
Go to the top. Get involved.
All right. Okay. Speaking up, right. Okay. So
down to the bottom.
Sign up to use it, become a donate as well. Fantastic. Yeah, it's very bad. So why do you think have they got you down as far right? And now that we've found out that you're actually a centre left libertarian party, you're now down as far right, being centre left. Just shows you where they are.
The Daily Mail in the election campaign, a Daily Mail article describes us as far right.
Wow! And we've do you not think that's fascinating now that we actually know where you are on the political spectrum, that you're actually centre left? Yeah. And describing it, they describe me as far right as well, and I'm a centrist libertarian liberal. I'm actually near the centre. But where does that put them on the political? If I'm as a centrist and you as a centrist, just slightly centre right, centre left, but as a centrist libertarian, where does that put them if I'm far right? Yeah. I would suggest it's them this problem. It's the postmodernist Marxists found out that they had killed 100 million people under Marxism and socialism in a variety of countries, and they don't seem to have any sort of understanding of what they've done, their political history.
I think some of the newspapers, they know which party they want to promote. So
the globalist one,
for example, they want to promote the Conservatives, and so they're going to bash all the other parties they think might be contenders with the Conservatives, because they've very much got their end in view, and they gear their coverage towards it. Yeah, but that's from the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail. That's not the Guardian. The Daily Mail.
Yeah. It's far right. But they seem to be I think Daily Mail is owned by Reach PLC, so they've got a stable of. So that again is another oligopoly that Reach PLC own a stable of publications, including I think the Daily Record as well, and they can manipulate people's perceptions of you. So we now know for the fact that you're actually a centre-left libertarian party. Yeah. So quite incredible. I didn't put you there either. I didn't think you were going to be there. So I find it very strange that you actually are a centre-left. I thought you were on the authoritarian right of the political spectrum.
It's interesting with the media. We've learned that quite often the media will only run a story about the family party if they think they've got something against us. So if we say go and project a message on a building and send it to them and say, look what we did, this is our story, this is our point, they'll ignore that. But what we find, if we project a message on a building and then have it sent to them as though someone's reporting us, so someone's saying, look what these terrible people have done. I think it might have been the Scottish Family Party. And then before you know it, there's the story, they've got someone disagreeing with us or whatever, and then at the bottom, a little quote from us. And it's the way you get him. So we did that a few times during the election campaign.
Right, so I've got a few questions here from my baby gorillas from just in the last couple of minutes. And don't vax the child abuse. I don't know what that means. So I don't know how good or bad these questions are going to be. So I'll just try and go through them. Maybe employ the government, psychology, terrorist, if worked, I don't know what happens. What not, join Scottish Cons, then fixed party. All right, okay.
I can answer the child vaccination one.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it seems odd that they wanted to vaccinate children because the danger of coronavirus there is so minuscule. No matter how safe the vaccine is, it just seems odd that they want to do that. But I haven't looked into it. I haven't got any expertise in the area, but I'm thinking that just seems a bit distraught. I don't think it's sinister. I just think they're just getting a bit carried away with themselves. Safety first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and no common sense.
So one of the guys has said, why not join the Scottish Conservatives and fix the party? There are many Scots powers Sturgeon don't use. A patriotic Tory government would work. Remember, the Tories gave the first referendum if you were Tories.
Well, the first answer to that is the Conservative Party wouldn't have me. If I joined the Conservatives and tried to get selected as a candidate, I would be rejected. Now,
can I just interject here? Because I actually stood for the Brexit Party as an MP, Richard, and some of the guys, I actually stood as chairman for the Scottish Young Conservatives and would have won a way back before MD knew me, before MD had spoken to me. And they changed the electoral system for both the senior and the junior party, and I lost by 4 votes, which I would have won, and became the chairman for the Scottish Conservative Party. So inside the Scottish Conservative Party, there's a cabal of corporatist globalists who, anybody that strays out with their sort of corporatist globalist agenda will get muted and expelled. And some of the guys, when I was standing in the Brexit Party, were not allowed to stand, who were Brexiteers, were not allowed to stand in Scotland in the Scottish Conservative Party. So I would have become the chairman of the Scottish Conservatives, but there is a cabal in the Conservative Party that don't allow people possibly, you're probably on the left anyways, or the party's on the left. So they're quite happy to terminate anybody who's not in the cabal.
Yeah, I think joining the Conservatives to try and change it, to me that's just an invitation to invest hundreds of hours to bang your head off a brick wall and ultimately to face rejection.
Yeah.
For me, it's already too late. I'm already on the record of saying too many things that they would say would just make me unsuitable. So yeah, that's completely off the agenda for me.
He says we don't have 20 years to save Scotland. We have 5. First, get back with the New World Order. We will only do that if guys like you join the Tories. I think the Tories are the problem, mate, to be honest with you. If the Scots Tories drifted from Westminster policy, that would already now have the majority to break loose. Only way I can see it ever happening. I can get a contract with Dominic voting nippy, forget the renew. Don't know what that means. A lot of Scots can't spell NWO. People don't vote because they don't trust any of the mainstream parties. So that's just what the guys are saying as well. There is no great difference between them. Which I think we've already pretty much addressed as well, haven't we? Name one party who are pro-free speech. Well, Scottish Libertarian Party are pro-free speech. Would you repeal the hate crime bills for the Farm Party?
Yeah, definitely. I think the hate crime bill is only part of the picture. Like the Conservatives voted against the hate crime bill, but they don't stand up for people when they get into hot water over freedom of speech, whereas we do. Everyone who gets in hot water freedom of speech, we're publicly supporting them.
Yeah, we were there. The Scottish Libertarian Party supported Count Dankula, and so do some of the Libertarian Liberalists as well. We're there to
support him.
Did you?
In the sense of saying he shouldn't have been prosecuted.
Yeah,
for us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Richard, this has been 3 hours. I told you 3 hours would fly by having a fantastic conversation. I found that, obviously I'm a bit of a political anorak, so I enjoy having these discussions as well. So I'll be looking forward to chatting with you. As I said, this was more of a get to know you and allow you to express what the party's doing as well. And I think we've all learned a lot today, which it was quite eye-opening, I would say. for that. What is a policy of breakfast for dinner? I don't know whether to talk about some of the comments my baby gorillas give me are absolutely hilarious. So, Rich, I just want to thank you for coming on the Guerilla TV channel.
No, thank you.
And hopefully what we'll do is stay in touch, and we will do like an alternative question time on the Guerilla TV channel. We'll get 4 other political leaders from the parties, and we'll do an all question time just in the same sort of manner. And we'll
look forward to it.
Yeah, and we'll get something different happening, and try and get them from all different parts of the political spectrum.
Right, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my
Till
friend.
next time.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Take care.
the opportunity.
Bye.
Right,
Bye.
good night.